Chapter 1985, The Signs of Civil War. The issue of Grisk hegemony is just a hypothesis, but if we restrict our massive fleet to our territory and do nothing because of this hypothesis, it will only play into the hands of the Grisk people. Admiral Chiara stated firmly. Then you should at least leave some of the battleships for defense. A member of the Eliz family shouted. At least leave the battleships of the Chiss defense fleet. Idiot! All Chiss defense fleets should be dispatched. For our defense issues, we can request assistance from the Dawn Principality's fleet, retorted a representative from the Naruto family. He understood the gravity of the situation and the formidable nature of Tang Xiao, the Grand Duke of Dawn, more clearly than most. He glanced nervously at Lieutenant General Brent and Captain Keith Maxwell, the commanders of the Dawn Principality fleet, who were seated on the other side of the conference room. He feared that the Eliz family's foolish remarks might offend the Dawn Principality. In this war, the Chiss fleet must fight on the front lines. If their fleet cowered behind and let the Dawn Principality's fleet take the lead, it was uncertain where the Dawn Principality's guns would be aimed. No, my plan is to attack with the entire army, and not a single capital ship will be left behind. The Eternal Super Aircraft Carrier will be responsible for the defense of the capital, Hisra planet, Admiral Chiara said calmly. General Brent will stay on the Eternal, and if there is an emergency on the border, he will reinforce it. You're crazy. The Eternal has only one ship, one formation. How can it possibly protect such a vast Chiss territory? A member of the Saberson family shouted. The Cipra family took a deep breath, looked at Lieutenant General Brent, and asked, May I ask what the Kingdom of Dawn has to say about this crazy battle plan? This plan may destroy all fleets and even affect our Chiss territory. Lieutenant General Brent responded indifferently. According to the agreement between the Dawn Principality and the Chiss territory, the combined fleet commander is the Chiss Defense Fleet Admiral, Eliz Alalani Ziara. We will fully cooperate with her arrangements and instructions. Then, Chiara will be removed from the post of Admiral. The Admiral of the Chiss Defense Fleet will be replaced by someone else. The Cipra family seized on this point, noting that the commander of the combined fleet is the Chiss Defense Fleet Admiral, but who this admiral is can be discussed. However, Brent still responded coldly. I suggest that you report this matter to Lord Tang Xiao, the Grand Duke of Dawn. Because if I remember correctly, Chiara serves as the commander of the combined fleet under Lord Tang Xiao's arrangement. The Cipra family representative trembled. Ever since returning from a visit to Dawn Planet, Tang Xiao, the Grand Duke of Dawn, had become a nightly nightmare. He was cruel, cold, murderous, crazy, and unpredictable. If they could choose, the Cipra family hoped never to speak to Tang Xiao again for the rest of their lives. And if this matter were reported to Tang Xiao, given the Grand Duke's temper, it might be their Chiss leader who would suffer. Admiral Chiara said coldly, Before the new combined fleet commander takes office, I will continue to perform my duties, and the combat orders I issued will continue to be implemented. You. The Naruto family was furious, but had no way to refute or even stop it. Because after the formation of the joint fleet was confirmed, in order to cooperate with this operation, under Chiara's arrangement, all the crews of the battleships of the Chiss Defense Fleet had been replaced by combat robots provided by Dawn Planet, just to prevent their own battleships from being controlled by the Grisk's mind control. This arrangement made the Chiss territory very nervous and angry, but the Principality of Dawn graciously agreed to Admiral Chiara's plan. Chiara, as the commander of the combined fleet, was given the authority to lead the BRAP expedition fleet of the Principality of Dawn. Concurrently, the Principality of Dawn released the programs of their combat robots, allowing Chiss scientists to inspect them for any logic that might be detrimental to the Chiss territory. This transparency led the Chislin cabinet to accept the arrangement. However, now the situation had changed dramatically. Admiral Chiara's recent actions made the 9 ruling families in the Chislin cabinet feel deceived. They suspected that Admiral Chiara had been bribed by the Principality of Dawn and labeled her a traitor. If their suspicions were correct, It meant that the Principality of Dawn had effectively used Admiral Chiara to strip the Chiss territory of its entire defense fleet with a single command. Delving deeper into their suspicions, they even considered the possibility that the war with the Grisk hegemony was a conspiracy orchestrated by the Principality of Dawn. The ultimate goal, they feared, was to gain complete military and political control over Chisland. The Naruto family, convinced they had uncovered the truth, fell back into their seats. After a moment of contemplation, one of them suddenly slapped the table and exclaimed, "Do the stars agree with this plan? Razdian will definitely not agree with this plan. Right? Why didn't this distinguished High Templar attend the meeting?" "The Protoss have no interest in our internal quarrels, and Razdian was the first to agree to this plan," Admiral Chiara responded coldly. The Sipra family, gritting their teeth, accused, "This is treason, Chiara. The Eliz family is also guilty of treason. You should know the kind of punishment that awaits you and your family." The faces of the Eliz family members turned pale. They realized that their family could not withstand such a severe accusation. A new wave of turmoil seemed imminent in the Chiss territory, and the Eliz family might face catastrophe. For those families coveting the Eliz family's authority, and even the Naruto family, who harbored a grudge over the expulsion of Misro Naruto Thrawn and sought revenge, this was a prime opportunity to strike and potentially annihilate the Eliz family. One member of the Eliz family looked desperately at Admiral Chiara. At this moment, she was their only hope for protection. "Chiara, think about it," he pleaded, his voice trembling. Admiral Chiara gritted her teeth and glanced at Lieutenant General Brent, who remained silent and indifferent. Taking a deep breath, she boldly declared, "The enemy of Grisk's hegemony is upon us. At this critical moment, the combined fleet will not stand by and allow any internal disputes in the Chiss territory for any reason." Her words commanded immediate respect. Everyone knew that the combined fleet, now under Admiral Chiara's command, was the most formidable military force in the entire Chiss territory, and even the entire unknown star field. There was no doubt about its power. Thanks to long live the great and glorious human civilization for the 100 starting coins. Chapter 1986, Thrawn's Teacher. Under the current circumstances, the high-ranking family representatives in Chisling's cabinet were horrified to discover that they no longer had any leverage to negotiate with Chiara. The fleet commanded by Chiara could easily decimate the planet Hizra, immediately, right away, on the spot. The Naruto family, gritting their teeth, said viciously, "Are you finally going to this point, Chiara? You should know what you just said." It meant treason. Admiral Chiara closed her eyes in pain. She was unwilling to face such a situation, and unwilling to become like this. However, facing the dual pressure of the Dawn Principality and the Grisk hegemony, she had no choice. In the past, she could forcibly veto the proposal of Lieutenant General Brent of the Principality of Dawn and prevent the fleet from attacking. But if she did that, when Lieutenant General Brent reported the matter to the Principality of Dawn, the result would likely be her immediate dismissal as Commander-in-Chief. Although she held the title of Commander-in-Chief, it was only tactical. On strategic issues, she had absolutely no say. The new Commander-in-Chief would definitely be a Chiss, but could they guarantee that the new leader wouldn't commit even more outrageous treasonous actions? After all, the current position of Commander-in-Chief of the combined fleet meant controlling invincible power. At least, as far as Admiral Chiara knew, another admiral from the Naruto family had much greater ambitions than she did. In recent years, if it weren't for the Naruto family's tarnished reputation due to Thrawn's incident, resulting in a decline in their standing, she, a general from the Eliz family, would never have been able to compete with the Naruto family, which specialized in controlling the military. Therefore, instead of letting others command the combined fleet and potentially overthrow the existing order of the Chiss territory, it was better for her to control the military power herself. At least, she was sure that she would never betray the Chiss territory. In less than a minute, Admiral Chiara had made up her mind. She said firmly, "As the Commander-in-Chief of the combined fleet, I will use all means to prevent civil unrest during the war. Such behavior will affect the advancement of this war. After the war is over, I will naturally resign as the commander-in-chief of the combined fleet. Despite her declaration, everyone present looked disbelieving. These ruling families had long put the struggle for power above national interests. They could not understand the loyalty shown by General Chiara, an upright soldier. But at this moment, the eyes of the Elias family representative were shining, as if he saw a brand new possibility. He stood up, waved his hand, and said loudly, "Admiral Chiara's decision is correct. The Elias family will fully support the Joint Fleet's action plan, and anyone who tries to secretly manipulate this operation will be punished as a traitor." He immediately aligned himself with the United Fleet, as if the person commanding the United Fleet was not Admiral Chiara, but the Elias family. Regardless of whether Chiara thought so, as long as the other ruling families in the cabinet believed it, that was enough. Yes, this is the right choice. The Chaff family immediately changed their attitude. The Inrokini family expresses its support. The Mies family fully agrees with Admiral Chiara's decision. These family representatives, who were making ugly appearances for their own purposes, did not notice the cold smile on the corners of the Saberson family's mouths, as if their conspiracy had succeeded. At this time, Admiral Chiara had already turned around and walked out. She didn't want to see the ugliness of these so-called politicians. She was a pure soldier, and she just felt disgusted by such things. Lieutenant General Brent and Keith Maxwell also stepped out. In fact, they were indifferent to such matters. On the contrary, the more these families in Chisland fought among themselves, the more beneficial it would be for the Principality of Dawn. The Principality of Dawn wouldn't even mind a civil war breaking out in Chisland, as it wouldn't affect their situation. Currently, the navy of the Principality of Dawn is unprecedentedly powerful, with the number of 1,000-meter-class battleships exceeding 500. Only 20 ships were sent to the Chiss territory. If Tang Xiao wished, more fleets could pass through the Stargate at any time and flatten the Chiss territory. The reason for not doing this is simply a matter of weighing costs and benefits. It seems that you are in a bad mood. Keith Maxwell took out a bottle of drink from somewhere and handed it to Admiral Chiara. To be honest, when I saw the looks of those guys, I was actually more surprised that your Chisland has not perished even after thousands of years. This is because of the efforts of our ancestors. Chisland has a vast territory, which also gives us unrivaled industrial and military strength. Admiral Chiara replied, glancing at Keith Maxwell. She sighed, took the drink, and took a sip, then frowned. The drink was bitter, but although it was bitter, the aftertaste was a refreshing fragrance. After drinking it, she felt that her head, which had been muddled in the conference room just now, had sobered up a lot. "What is this?" Admiral Chiara asked with a frown. "Tea. It's a drink brewed with special leaves. The one I'm giving you is called Dahong Pao. Although I don't quite understand why a drink is named after clothes, I quite like it," Keith Maxwell said. "I think you need this." Admiral Chiara closed her eyes, sighed again, and said, "At the beginning of our contact, after learning that you knew Thrawn, I was very surprised. But as you now know, Thrawn was expelled from Chisland. In the eyes of those families, Thrawn is an alien, even a sinner." "You said that you and Thrawn are comrades in arms," Lieutenant General Brent said. "Not just a comrade, he was once my student," General Chiara reminisced. Keith Maxwell was shocked. "Student? Did you know that Grand Duke Tang Xiao regarded Thrawn as the most dangerous general in the Galactic Empire during a military meeting? Then the Grand Duke's judgment is correct. Thrawn is indeed the most talented person I know. No matter the environment, he can always find a chance to win. He is always full of confidence and never afraid of failure, because he never fails," said Admiral Chiara. "And you are his teacher," Lieutenant General Brent emphasized. "I am only 3 years older than him, but I had been attending the Chiss Naval Academy a little longer. Thrawn's family was very poor, so when he entered the school he was actually overage," Admiral Chiara explained. "You have also heard those in the ruling family repeatedly accuse Thrawn of cheating. In fact, they are just mediocre people who cannot understand the ideas of a genius." "Oh," Keith Maxwell prompted, "that was a simulated combat test. Thrawn's score in the simulation exceeded the highest record in the Academy's history by a wide margin, and the proctor of that test was me," Chiara continued. Later, the Academy believed that Thrawn was cheating because his actions in the simulation could not be replicated. She smiled coldly and said, "You know what? At the hearing, those people tried desperately to prove that Thrawn's results were impossible. They were almost exactly the same as their ugly appearance today. However, as the Invigilator, I saw Thrawn's command. It was a genius combat move. He adapted to the situation, seized the blind spot at that moment, launched an attack, and then defeated the enemy with almost no injuries." Thrawn called this stealth maneuver, I emphasized at the hearing. "But it seems like you didn't convince them," Keith Maxwell said. "That's right. Because of my persistence, Thrawn's cheating case was not pronounced in the end. But because that stealth maneuver could never be replicated, those so-called military experts who were jealous of Thrawn's genius always believed that Thrawn was a Ting, and that I was just covering up for my student. Even Thrawn himself can't replicate it?" "Exactly. That's why he's a genius." Admiral Chiara's frozen face softened with a smile when she mentioned Thrawn. She continued, "After that, Thrawn's performance was outstanding, and he successfully entered the Chiss Defense Fleet. He became an officer in the fleet with me and started his military career step by step from the patrol team. From that time on, the battles Thrawn commanded never failed. But at the same time, he received not appreciation, but doubts and criticisms." Questioned even if he won? Keith Maxwell was incredulous. They accused him of taking the initiative without waiting for a second strike. They accused him of destroying the wings of their luxury spaceship to rescue civilians. They accused him of acting without permission and humiliating the commander. In short, Thrawn defeated almost everyone, but also offended almost everyone. Too many things happened after that, and the result was that he was exiled, Admiral Chiara said. "It's no wonder the Naruto family is so angry, because such a military genius was taken away from them," Keith Maxwell said. Admiral Chiara smiled coldly. "Do you really think the Naruto family wants Thrawn to come back? They just used this incident as an excuse to suppress the Eliz family. After all, Thrawn's exile was orchestrated by the Eliz family, but if Thrawn ever wanted to return, the Naruto family would be the first to oppose it." She turned her head and looked at the sky. The climate on the planet Chisla was very cold, and it was snowing heavily. Fortunately, there was no wind, and they could still stand outside and enjoy the scenery. "Actually, you don't need to think of me as a member of the Eliz family," Chiara said. "Although I was indeed born into the Eliz family, according to the laws of the Chiss territory, I joined the Chiss Defense Fleet and became a Commodore. During the promotion ceremony, I swore to break away from my original family, and I am no exception. Therefore, my position now is from the perspective of the Chiss territory, not the Eliz family. But after all, your parents and relatives are still in the Eliz family. They still have a strong influence on you, don't they? You saw the expressions of the Eliz family just now. They almost took advantage of your plan to suppress or even eliminate the enemy family," Keith Maxwell said. Admiral Chiara's expression became extremely serious, and she gritted her teeth. "This is absolutely impossible. I am not the kind of person who puts family struggle over national interests. No, I should say, what I hate most are people like them." She took a deep breath. "Please rest assured, I will never let the Chiss territory fall into chaos or even civil war because of family interests. In fact, it's not impossible to show me one of your civil wars." Lieutenant General Brent thought to himself. But after all, he was several years older than Chiara, who was in her 40s, and he would not participate much in such conversations. With their own thoughts in mind, after Admiral Chiara executed this combat plan with great force, 2 days later, all the capital ships in the Chiss territory had completed their assembly on the capital planet Hisla. The forces participating in this operation included 20 capital ships and 50 cruisers of the Kingdom of Dawn Navy, 8 Night Dragon-class battleships, 26 Lion-class cruisers, and 70 Firewolf-class ships. The Chiss Navy's fleet consisted of 3 types of warships, all referred to as man-of-war by the Chiss, though they varied significantly in size. The Night Dragon class measured nearly 800 meters in length, the Lion class exceeded 600 meters, and the Firewolf class was over 400 meters long. This particular combat operation did not involve smaller warships, primarily due to the navigational challenges and safety concerns associated with traversing complex hyperspace channels. After assembling, the massive fleet departed from the capital, Hisla, under the guidance of the high-ranking Templar, Razdian. The Chislin cabinet watched with unease as the fleet embarked on its mission. Author's note: the story of Thrawn is primarily derived from the Thrawn trilogy novels. In the original books, Thrawn's exile is a much more complex and intricate affair. However, since the protagonist of our story is the fourth civilization, it is impractical to delve too deeply into Thrawn's plotline. Therefore, I have simplified and condensed Thrawn's story within the Chisland to fit our narrative, aiming to explain it in just a few thousand words. The general context remains unchanged. Thrawn is an unwelcome presence in the Chiss territory. For those familiar with the Thrawn trilogy, please understand that some plot adjustments were necessary. In short, this is the essence of the story, and to be honest, I haven't read the novels either. Chapter 1987, Battle of Crust, Part 1. A burst of uneven white light flashed, and a massive fleet composed of more than 200 warships emerged from hyperspace, arriving in front of a relatively small planet. The positions of these battleships were chaotic, resembling a disorganized cluster of drifting spaceships. The formation of the 200 spaceships stretched for thousands of kilometers in the universe, appearing as nothing more than a scattered collection of vessels. In a real battle, defenders could easily exploit this disarray, launching an assault to divide and conquer the fleet, leading to inevitable disaster. However, this was an unknown star territory, and the chaotic hyperspace environment made it nearly impossible to navigate such a large fleet. Even with the guidance of the Protoss High Templar Razdian, the fleet was in disarray upon exiting hyperspace. Despite this, the fleet, which included 20-kilometer-class battleships, 8 800-meter Night Dragon-class ships, and 150 cruisers of various types, still posed a formidable presence in the unknown star field. The inhabitants of the planet Crustal remained silent and dared not make any moves. In their horrified eyes, the combined fleet began to reorganize. Under the command of Admiral Chiara, it took the fleet a full hour to re-establish its formation. The delay was not due to Chiara's lack of command skills, but rather the rigid operations of the B-1 combat robots manning the fleet. Even with the coordination of T-Series tactical robots, the process was still chaotic. Meanwhile, the colonial administrator of the planet Crustal sent a message. Chiss! Why has your fleet invaded our territory? Planet Crustal is a dominion. Are you intending to break previous treaties and start a war? The Crustian administrator appeared on the screen. Admiral Chiara responded coldly. I have no interest in your planet colony of Crusti, but we need to understand why Crusti spacecraft appeared on the planet Norris to participate in the attack on Norris. This is nonsense. Our ship has never been to the planet Norris, the Crustian chief executive retorted. This has been confirmed. Do you need me to show you the wreckage of your spaceship and the corpse of the Crusti pilot? Admiral Chiara said coldly. We suspect the Crusti people colluded with the Grisk hegemony and launched a war against the Chiss territory. We demand a thorough search of the Crusta colony. The Crustians are weak in power. Whether it is the Grisk hegemony or the Chiss territory, they are beyond our reach. With the ability of the Grisk people, it is not difficult to control a few of us and steal our spaceship, right? The chief executive said calmly. Keith Maxwell, standing aside, frowned and whispered, Why aren't they afraid? This is unreasonable. Admiral Chiara was startled, realizing the problem. Maxwell, who had been traveling around the galaxy for a long time, was naturally more sensitive to such observations. In contrast, Chiara, who had been focused on combat command in the command center, did not pay much attention to this aspect. Indeed, the massive formation of 200 warships loomed above their colony. Facing such overwhelming power, the Crustians seemed too calm. The chief executive was still negotiating. The Crustians only had one planet. If it were bombed, they would face extinction. Why was this person not afraid? Talk to him face to face, and I'll go with you. High-ranking Templar Razdian's voice echoed in Chiara's mind. Maxwell nodded slightly. The chief executive continued, We, the Crustal colony, are willing to cooperate with your investigation. You can send me the codes of the spacecraft that attacked the planet Norris, and I will check their origins and permissions to leave the port. However, this may take some time. No need. We will send a delegation to discuss this face-to-face, Admiral Chiara interrupted. The chief executive frowned and blurted out, "Of course, there is no problem in sending a delegation." No, wait, why are you sending a delegation? Isn't it reason enough that Krustian spacecraft appeared in the fleet attacking our planet? Admiral Chiara said coldly. The chief executive's expression froze. Literally, he remained motionless, looking extremely strange. After nearly 10 seconds, his expression regained its composure, and he showed a bright smile. "This is, of course, very welcome. I will arrange for someone to greet you immediately. He is being controlled, but I need close contact to find out where the person controlling him is," Razdian said. Admiral Chiara's eyes flashed with a sharp light. "Is there really a problem? I can confirm that he is controlled. The mind control of the Grisk people is not simple brainwashing or basic mind control. It is a compound process. Although their control method is crude, it is not because they are powerless. They choose the least labor-intensive way to control more people." Razdian explained. "They control other races in an organized way, not on impulse. This means that this is not the limit of the Grisk people?" Maxwell was a little surprised. "No. According to my research, their mind control leaves a lot of redundancy. They control a country or even a race in an organized and systematic way," Razdian said. "I will go to him. If there is indeed a problem, I will expose it. And don't worry, I will take you back safely." "Can we find their location? We know nothing about the Grisk hegemony." "I'm curious about what they are," Maxwell asked. "Let's go," Razdian said calmly, but he did not answer the question. Protoss High Templar Razdian, Keith Maxwell, and several followers formed a temporary team and took a shuttle to the administrative center of the Krustian colony. Heavy troops were already stationed around the administrative center. Tens of thousands of heavily armed soldiers surrounded the area, eyeing the shuttle that Razdian and the others were riding in with suspicion. Such a scene made Maxwell feel very nervous. He looked outside through the porthole window. "Are we really going down? I think they will tear us apart as soon as we get off the spacecraft. Believe in our plan. It will succeed." The voice that reached his mind was still extremely calm. The shuttle landed on the apron above the administrative center, where the Krustian administrator was already waiting with his entourage. Watching Maxwell step off the spacecraft, he smiled and said, "Seeing that your Chiss territory is willing to put down your guns and come in peace, I can finally say this: welcome to the Crustal Dominion." Then he saw the Protoss following him and was stunned. "Oh, a race I have never seen before. Hello." Weird races were not uncommon in the unknown starfield, so although he was a little afraid of the visible power of the Protoss, he didn't react much. "Ha!" Keith Maxwell laughed and walked up, rudely patting the chief executive's shoulder. "Let's get straight to the point. Where are the Grisks?" The administrator showed a strange smile and replied, "The Grisk hegemony is everywhere. They can be there, they can be here, and of course they may also be in front of you. There is a force trying to control you. Wait a moment." High-ranking Templar Razdian's voice came into Keith Maxwell's mind. "I found it, in this administrative building." "We need to capture them alive," Razdian commanded. In response, several Star Spirit Zealot warriors beside him leaped forward, rushing towards the administration building with incredible speed. "You can't." The chief executive instinctively raised his hand to stop them, but was swiftly knocked aside by one of the Zealot warriors. Keith Maxwell immediately drew his M3 Predator pistol, a weapon known for its rapid fire and powerful shots. He quickly took down several Krustians without hesitation. Razdian had warned them beforehand that the minds of these controlled individuals were irreparably distorted, leaving them with only one option: kill. The Protoss Zealot warriors were the first to breach the administrative building. Light blades, akin to lightsabers, shot out from their wrist armor. Their speed and strength were dozens of times greater than that of ordinary humans. Once they entered the crowd, they became like lawnmowers, leaving behind a trail of severed limbs and bodies. At this moment, All the crustites around them seemed to go berserk, charging at the warriors. The guards around the administrative building also began firing at the spaceport where their spacecraft was docked, showing no concern for friendly fire. Ta-ta-ta-ta! Ta-ta-ta-ta! The dense barrage of bullets struck the shuttle, causing the deflector shield to ripple violently. In this unknown starfield, where explosive gas was absent and the local civilization lacked blaster rifle technology, the Crustians used live ammunition electromagnetic rifles. Though powerful, these weapons were not as effective as blaster rifles and couldn't penetrate the shuttle's shield. Several rockets exploded against the shuttle. The robotic pilot immediately took off, and the turret above the shuttle opened fire on the crowd below. Boom! Boom! The blaster cannon's beams exploded among the Crustians, sending limbs and bodies flying. Yet, the Crustians seemed oblivious to fear or pain, continuing their relentless charge. Maxwell glanced down from the tarmac, his scalp tingling with dread. "Damn it, they're everywhere!" he exclaimed. He saw countless Crustians swarming like locusts, not just the tens of thousands of guards but also civilians. The sight was terrifying. Razdian remained calm. "He's trying to escape. Too many people are blocking him. According to the plan, call for reinforcements." The bullets aimed at him were deflected by an invisible barrier, and Keith Maxwell beside him remained unharmed. However, the shuttle in the air wasn't as fortunate. It was bombarded by countless missiles and anti-aircraft fire, quickly becoming riddled with holes before exploding and disintegrating mid-air. The shuttle was merely a decoy. Seizing the opportunity, Razdian raised his hand, unleashing a torrent of lightning bolts into the dense crowd. The lightning wreaked havoc, killing Crustians in droves and leaving no room for resistance. A nearby building struck by the lightning was blown in half by its sheer power. With a single blow, Razdian killed hundreds of Crustians, creating a large open space filled with corpses and wreckage. Even the Crustians' 4-meter-tall mechas were no match for the psychic lightning, crumpling like paper. Damn! Keith Maxwell was stunned, struggling to find words for several seconds. But there was no time for awe. They quickly left the tarmac and entered the administrative building, stepping over the bodies that littered the floor. Although there are only 10 Protoss fanatic warriors, they are an unstoppable force against the technologically backward Crustites. The Grisk who wants to control you ran towards the north. Razdian pointed in a direction. "I have locked onto his mind. He can't escape. I have sealed off the entire planet to ensure that not a single bug can fly out," Admiral Chiara said over the communication channel. In space, 200 warships have surrounded the planet Krustel. Hundreds of fighter jets are constantly patrolling, ready to destroy any spacecraft attempting to take off from the planet without even a chance to ask questions. Simultaneously, dozens of dragonfly-shaped C-9979 landing ships broke through the planet's atmosphere, forcing a landing towards the capital of Crust despite the ground's anti-aircraft firepower. Hundreds of Ghost fighter planes descended from the sky, carrying out targeted strikes on all exposed air defense positions. Suddenly, a large fire cloud appeared in the sky, caused by the friction and fire of the atmosphere, as two extremely huge spherical spaceships descended from the heavens. End of chapter. Chapter 1988, Battle of Kruste, 2. The dragonfly-like C-9979 transport ship landed on the ground. This large transport ship, over 300 meters long, carried more than a dozen MTT robot transport vehicles. These vehicles can quickly deploy a large number of B-1 combat robots and provide them with charging and maintenance functions. As the MTT transport vehicles drove out of the transport ship, they immediately began to move towards their target. Meanwhile, the capital of the planet Krustel was in chaos, with almost everyone rushing out with weapons in hand. In the sky, two enormous spherical spaceships slowly descended to the ground. 4 hatches opened from the bottom of each spacecraft, and rows of B-1 combat robots marched out in neat lines. After a brief assembly, they advanced towards the capital. This scene was eerily reminiscent of the Trade Federation's invasion of the planet Naboo. The Principality of Dawn had conducted extensive research on tactics and equipment for landing operations. They studied combat methods and tactics, provided targeted training for soldiers, and educated officers. This led to the development of specialized equipment. After a long period of exploration and transformation, the Principality of Dawn had formed a rapid landing combat system centered around the Kisov-class battlecruiser. This warship, nicknamed a coal ship in the military, was now the core of the Marine Corps of the Principality of Dawn. It could quickly deploy landing troops, whether through orbital airborne or rapid airborne landing, making it the best choice for such operations. Given that the combat targets were the Grisk people, known for their mind control capabilities, the landing operation had to rely primarily on robot troops. The robot army had no thoughts, no life, only obedience and killing. These cold killing machines were the biggest natural enemies of Grisk's hegemony. Therefore, the best landing warship for this operation against Grisk hegemony was naturally the Rookery Hook-class battleship. This battleship, a modified LH-3210 cargo ship, had a ring-shaped structure with a diameter of over 3,000 meters and a giant spherical core ship with a diameter of 1,029 meters at its center. During the Clone Wars, it was the main battleship of the Trade Federation and was also provided to the Confederacy of Independent Systems, becoming an important part of the Confederate Navy. Due to its enormous size, the Rookery Hook-class battleship was often used by the Trade Federation to carry a massive army of robots. The giant spherical core ship could carry between 140,000 to 600,000 B-1 combat robots, depending on the proportion of heavy armor units. The surrounding ring structure could carry 1,500 Vulture robot fighters and 50 C-9979 landing ships. However, this type of warship, being a modified cargo ship, had limited firepower and protection. It was a thin-skinned type and was largely phased out by the Trade Alliance in the later stages of the war. After Tang Xiao provided some ship technology to the Trade Federation, production of the Rookery Hook-class battleships was discontinued. The remaining parts were used as aircraft carriers by the Confederation of Independent Systems, but they were mostly destroyed in the final stages of the war. The other part was retained by the Principality of Dawn to continue being used as armed cargo ships. Given the rampant pirate and rebel activities, the firepower of the Rookery Hook-class battleship was more than sufficient to deal with those threats. In this war to attack Grisk's hegemony, among the reinforcements Razdian brought, there were 2 Rookery Hook-class battleships. These were modified battleships, with the originally huge hangar platform on the ring-shaped hull. The production capacity had been slightly reduced, and 2 B-1 combat robot production lines were installed inside. According to intelligence, the civilizations in the unknown star field generally lacked strong air power. Therefore, air supremacy was expected to be on their side, making the ability to sustain combat critical. After the high-ranking Templar Razdian saw through the Grisk's conspiracy to control the Krustians, the Grisk seemed to sense something was wrong telepathically and fled quickly. He also controlled a large number of Krustites around him to rush over and provide cover. To capture the survivors alive, Keith Maxwell immediately informed Admiral Chiara, who was stationed in space, to launch a landing operation as planned. Under the air cover of the Ghost fighter planes, the 2 Rookery Hook-class battleships released a large number of C-9979 transport ships. Simultaneously, the 1,029-meter diameter spherical core ship separated from the main body and descended towards the ground, deploying more combat robots. The tens of thousands of guards who had been assembled earlier swarmed towards the administrative center. Razdian and his team rushed into the administrative center, but it was already crowded with people. 10 Protoss fanatic warriors fought their way inside, but the Krustians kept coming in an endless stream. Razdian raised his hand again, and the surrounding air seemed to vibrate. Countless lightning bolts were emitted, forming a terrifying power grid in front of him. Wherever the lightning passed, the Krustians were electrocuted into ashes by the powerful energy, leaving no residue behind. Even more frightening was that within the power grid, 10 fanatic warriors continued to run around, killing and slaughtering, yet the dense lightning did not hit them at all. Whether it was the tacit understanding between the Protoss or the precise control of the high-level Templars, this scene undoubtedly demonstrated the terrifying power of the nearly perfect Protoss race. The lightning directly opened a large hole in the wall of the administrative center, turning everything in its path into ashes. Nothing could withstand the power of the High Templar. However, the Grisk had already fled far away. He obviously had transportation. After using all the Crustians as human shields, his escape was very decisive. "He can't get away," Keith Maxwell gritted his teeth. His marksmanship was also very accurate. The M3 Predator pistol fired every shot without missing, but it paled in comparison to the terrifying combat power of the Protoss. At this time, the robot army had launched an attack. The first batch of CTT armored transport vehicles was quickly deployed. More than 10,000 B-1 combat robots were arranged in a battle formation, holding E5 blaster rifles while advancing in the direction of the Crustians, firing as they moved. In front of this cold-blooded and ruthless legion, the Crustians' guard force almost collapsed. They attempted to mobilize heavy artillery for bombing, but those artillery pieces were destroyed by the stealth Ghost fighter planes before they even had a chance to fire. With only flesh and blood left, there was no way to withstand the steel torrent of battle robots. But the Crustians seemed to have no fear. Even as their comrades fell like weed around them, they still roared and launched a counterattack. Thanks to Mingwu Huaxia for the 500 starting coins. Chapter 1989, Battle of Crustal, Part 2. The landing battle on the planet Crustal seemed to echo the early days of the Clone Wars, reminiscent of 22 BBY, a decade ago. C-9979 transport ships soared through the sky, MTT armored transport vehicles rumbled across the ground, and rows of B-1 battle droids advanced methodically, their cold mechanical steps echoing through the air. For the Principality of Dawn, this was a low-cost war, almost a destocking operation. However, calling it destocking isn't entirely accurate, as the Principality of Dawn had never phased out the B-1 battle droids. On the contrary, they maintained a vast number of these droids. The B-1 battle droid was a classic, cheap, available in massive quantities, and versatile enough to handle almost any task with a simple program update. Currently, the Principality of Dawn boasted over 300 billion B-1 battle droids, with numbers still rising. These diligent droids were ubiquitous, found in all sectors of society. To keep costs low, the Principality only upgraded the droid's software, leaving the original design unchanged. Most of the Principality's industrial capacity was dedicated to manufacturing battleships, and with the need to mobilize against Rendili Interstellar Power Company, production in this area had increased. Thus, the cost-effective and high-quality productivity of the B-1 battle droids became a crucial component of the Principality's industrial system. On many battlefields, the B-1 battle droids proved more reliable than expected. Despite their simplicity, they formed a legion smart enough to handle basic battlefield scenarios, fearless, tireless, and numerous. Except for elite warriors like the Galactic Republic's clone soldiers, most ordinary soldiers struggled to withstand the B-1 droid's relentless advance. This was evident in the landing battle on Crustal. The Crustians' technology was underdeveloped. They had only recently mastered interstellar navigation. Their industrial system was rudimentary, and their military technology was outdated. Their electromagnetic rifles struggled to damage the B-1 droids, let alone destroy aircraft. The first wave of 10,000 battle droids quickly breached the Crustians' defenses, entering the capital and engaging in fierce street battles. Soon, even more B-1 droids descended from the core ships of the Rookery Hook-class battleships, forming a siege around the capital. The two Rookery Hook-class battleships carried a staggering 1.2 million B-1 battle droids, sacrificing heavy armor units to reduce logistical pressure during this expedition into an unknown star field. All fire support was provided by air forces, primarily Phantom and Viking fighters. The Crustians attempted to launch spaceships in a desperate bid to resist, but these were swiftly destroyed by the invisible Phantom fighters. The Crustians had no means to detect these stealthy attackers. Despite the B-1 droid's simple combat patterns, the one-sided massacre was effortless. Witnessing the devastation, the fleeing Grisk people abandoned their plans to escape by spaceship. They resorted to mind-controlling more Crustians, using their lives to delay the pursuers. However, the arrival of a million-strong robot army from the two Rookery Hook-class battleships shattered all their illusions. The powerful psychic intruder did not continue the pursuit. Instead, Keith Maxwell, rejoined the robot army, which advanced steadily, giving the enemy no chance to regroup. Even when the Grisk people sent out all the civilians from the capital area, it was futile. The robot army, undeterred by the presence of civilians, continued its assault. The B-1 combat robots fired at every target identified as an enemy by their sensors, showing no hesitation. Although there were still large numbers of troops in other areas of the planet Kruste, mobilizing them back to the capital area would take considerable time. Thus, despite controlling the entire planet, the Grisk could only rely on the people in the capital district. The airspace around the capital was completely blocked, rail transportation destroyed, and communications disrupted, turning it into an isolated island. The one-sided massacre by the B-1 battle robot army lasted for about a day. Over 2 million crusters, sent out as cannon fodder by the Grisk, were brutally slaughtered. The city was littered with corpses. Under Razdian's precise positioning, the robot army eventually surrounded the Grisk people in a village. Keith Maxwell and Razdian arrived at the outskirts of the village and halted the robot army's attack. They needed to capture the mysterious Grisk people alive. Without any communication, 10 Protoss fanatic warriors shot forward, turning into afterimages as they entered the village. 2 large, 4-meter-tall mechas made by the Krustians emerged, but they were ineffective. The fanatic warriors' rapid maneuvers made it impossible for the mechas to lock on, and they quickly circled around to cut off the mechas' power systems with their wrist-mounted lightsabers. Razdian also entered the village in a flash, with all oncoming electromagnetic rifle bullets passing harmlessly through him. As a high-level Templar existing between the material dimension and higher latitudes, he was impervious to such weapons. Previously, in the administrative center, he had generated a psychic barrier to protect Keith Maxwell. The remaining resistance in the village was swiftly crushed. A short man, clearly different from the surrounding Krustites, ran out of a house. He was about 1.6 meters tall, with deep-set eyes, sloping brow ridges, broad shoulders, a tapered skull, and a fierce expression. Seeing the Protoss approaching, he roared in an unknown language, likely cursing, but was immediately subdued by a fanatic warrior. "Is he a Grisk?" Keith Maxwell asked, observing the man. "He looks different from what I imagined. Aren't they supposed to be a legendary species, demigods per capita?" "He does possess powerful psychic abilities," Razdian communicated telepathically. "He has been trying to control you since we arrived." Chapter 1990, The Conspiracy of the Grisk People. Starting from the capital area of the planet Crust, everything was in chaos. Buildings lay in ruins, roads were bombed, and dense clusters of corpses were scattered everywhere. These bodies had been shot by blasters, their explosive power capable of tearing bodies apart instantly. The E5 blaster rifle, more powerful than ordinary blaster rifles, generates a lot of heat when fired. After a few shots, it becomes too hot to handle. However, for the B-1 combat robots, this was not an issue. To the Krustians, the weapons used by this robotic army were terrifyingly powerful, with each shot as devastating as a grenade. Even the Fourth Civilization, before developing supermatter acceleration technology, relied heavily on explosive weapons, and they still use many such weapons today. The culprit behind this massacre had been captured by the Protoss zealot warriors. Despite being caught, the short Grisk man continued to yell angrily, his eyes shining with a strange light. Suddenly, his powerful mind control ability exploded. Keith Maxwell felt dizzy and nauseous, forcing him to step back. The Protoss zealot warrior holding the Grisk man also felt faint. Seizing this momentary weakness, the Grisk man fired a bolt of lightning from his mouth. The lightning was sudden and powerful, but it only caused a ripple in front of the zealot warrior's energy shield. The Grisk man couldn't understand how the energy shield could be miniaturized for personal use. Despair filled his face as the zealot warrior held him down again. Without hesitation, the warrior slapped the Grisk, beating him to pieces, and forcibly opened his mouth. Inside, they found that the Grisk's entire set of teeth was a metal mechanical device from which the lightning had been emitted. The warrior tore off the metal device, leaving the Grisk's mouth bloody and causing him to scream in pain. The Grisk man struggled fiercely, but against the nearly 3-meter-tall Protoss, he was like a child with no ability to resist. After removing the weapon from his gums, the Zealot warrior took a bottle of first aid spray thrown by Maxwell and sprayed it into the Grisk man's mouth. After all this, the Grisk man was left half-conscious, paralyzed on the ground. Razdian walked over and placed a metal collar around the Grisk's neck. He glanced at the curious Maxwell and explained, "This collar can block their use of psychic energy. Whenever he attempts to use his psychic powers, the electrodes on the ring will cause him enough pain to remember." The Zealot warrior then carried the Grisk man back to the spacecraft like a chicken. After being treated by a medical robot in the medical room, the Grisk man, who had almost died from heavy bleeding, finally recovered a little. He sat exhausted on a stool in the interrogation room. Admiral Chiara, Keith Maxwell, and Razdian stood in front of him. Admiral Chiara asked coldly in the Chiss language, "Tell me, what is your name? How many of you are there on the planet Crust? Don't act stupid. All civilizations in this star field learn the Chiss language." The Grisk looked at Razdian with a fearful expression and then replied in the Chiss language, "My name is Sangare, and the Crusti are my client race. Here, I am the only Grisk." "Client race? What does this mean?" Maxwell asked, frowning. "To put it simply, these weak but numerous races are my customers. They provide me with services in any field," Sangare said, looking directly at Razdian. "Your race also possesses great power. When one wields power as strong as ours, many tasks no longer need to be done personally." From the beginning to the end, he never acknowledged Maxwell and Chiara. In his eyes, these weak and inferior races were only worthy of being his clients. "You are wrong," Razdian replied calmly. "With power comes responsibility. There are no inherently good or bad races in the universe. We do have immense power, but we should use it to help others. The universe has never been a place where one can survive alone." "Heh, hypocrisy," Sangare sneered. "Even your ordinary conversations are telepathic. As long as you are willing, controlling a planet or a race is a piece of cake. You will always be on the side of the strong. Don't you think it's ridiculous to let those weaklings play that game called fair with you?" He turned to Chiara with a mocking smile. "And you, the Chiss, do you feel it? You have developed industrial and military power. In the past, you were the overlords in chaos, and no one dared to provoke you. And now, facing the Principality of Dawn, do you have any ability to resist? Now you are just a pet raised by the Principality of Dawn. They are polite to you on the surface, but in fact, have they given you a choice?" The issue between Chisland and the Principality of Dawn will naturally be resolved by both of us. "This matter has nothing to do with you," Keith Maxwell interjected, not wanting to leave this issue to Chiara. "Since you have always emphasized that the weak should prey on the strong, now we stand on the side of the strong and ask you to surrender. Otherwise." "The stronger side? Is the Dawn Principality really the strong one? How do you compare with the Galaxy Empire?" "Ha ha ha," Sangare sneered. "You will always be the losers in this war, the Dawn Principality." A burst of anger surged in Maxwell's heart. "It doesn't matter what happens to the Galactic Empire. At least now, I have enough means to make you miserable." He stood up, pulled out a dagger, and stabbed Sangare in the thigh with a swift motion. Sangare screamed immediately, but then a medical robot floated over and sutured his wound without any anesthesia. Admiral Chiara said coldly, "You have been observing us, and you are also observing the Principality of Dawn. This war was actually launched by you deliberately. It is you who want the war." "No, it is the Principality of Dawn that wants war." Sangare's expression was ferocious from the pain. "Aren't you curious why it was such a coincidence that when purifying Mongol Mengel, they mistakenly bombed a colony? We do have a very extensive spy network and intelligence network, but this is the only thing we can't do." "You bastard!" Maxwell stabbed him again. Sangare screamed once more, suppressing his next words. Admiral Chiara's expression was gloomy, contemplating what Sangare had just said. At this moment, Razdian's voice echoed in her mind. "A person's spiritual defense line is like a castle. Some places have strong defenses and thick walls, and some places have weak defenses and lack of walls. Therefore, to succeed in mind control, one must find the weaknesses in their minds. This is something that every mind controller is very good at. Look, I'm not wrong. You know a lot about mind control. This is not something that a person who has never been involved in mind control can say. You are just enjoying this feeling of being superior and looking down on all living beings. You must call yourself a god, and then take away from the weaker races, using that superficial help to satisfy your own pathetic sense of morality, Sangari said with a hideous smile. However, Razdian looked at him very calmly and said lightly, "Not anymore." Sangari burst into a fit of sarcastic laughter. However, his laughter abruptly ceased the next second. He began shaking his head desperately, his eyes nearly bulging out of their sockets, as if he were enduring excruciating pain. It took a full 2 minutes for the torment to subside. When it finally did, Sangari looked at Razdian with fear in his eyes and said weakly, "Ask me. I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything." "How many Grisk people are there on the planet Crustal?" Razdian asked. 7. The 7 of us jointly control the planet Crustal, Sangari answered honestly. We Grisk are very scattered. In fact, except for reproduction, we don't need to be together at all. Naturally, we have our own client races to provide us with everything we want. Maxwell interjected, "How many races do you control?" "I don't know," Sang admitted. Seeing Maxwell's hand inching towards his knife again, he quickly added, "I really don't know. The Grisk hegemony keeps the distribution of its sphere of influence top secret. We are regularly informed of what we need to know by messengers from the core of the hegemony. For example, after I completed my training in mind control, a messenger came to arrange for me to go to the planet Crustal to control them. Our strategies and actions are all based on the envoy's arrangements. As for what other planets are like, we have absolutely no idea." "When did you start investigating the situation in the Principality of Dawn?" Maxwell asked again. "Ever since the war you call the Clone War broke out, we began collecting intelligence from the outside world," Sangari replied. "And after you entered chaos through the Stargate, you immediately alerted the core of the hegemony. According to what the envoy said during his last visit, the Grisk hegemony decided to take a preemptive strike and completely defeat you before the Dawn Principality discovers us. In other words, you want to collude with the Galactic Empire to deal with us?" Maxwell pressed. "I am not responsible for that matter, so I only know the general idea. The messenger did not tell me the specific situation," Sangari explained. Razdian asked, "I have studied the subjects controlled by you. You forcibly distort their souls, wills, and memories, destroy their psychological defenses, and then use your own power to build a false spiritual world for them. But this process should be very long. How do you operate if you want to control an entire race?" "It's the envoy," Sangari said. "After the envoy issues the mission, he will also tell me the weakness of that race. Then I use this weakness to spread panic among the entire race, gradually destroying their psychological defenses, much like a viral infection. It is always difficult to control the target at first, but as time goes by, the spread of control becomes smoother and smoother." He paused and then continued. "Sometimes wars break out. Some races have stronger psychological defenses, or after they realize that someone is controlling them, they rise up to resist. At this time, their hearts become stronger. Whenever this happens, we can only solve the problem through war. However, those who start the war are those who are controlled by us. In other words, the compatriots of these people, seeing their former comrades appear in front of them, no matter how strong their spiritual defense is, it will collapse." Admiral Chiara asked, "Grisk hegemony, is it a starship civilization or a civilization with a homeland?" Sangari seemed suddenly confused. He replied, "We don't need a home at all. We are scattered among the planets of controlled races and enjoy the services provided to us by an entire planet. For some races that we find useful, we move their population to other places and use them as laborers." "A very powerful spiritual suggestion," Razdian remarked. "What did you say?" Maxwell was stunned. Deep in his heart, there is a line of defense built for him by others, and this line of defense is about their homeland, Razdian explained. Chiara nodded and said, "Yes, let's think about it in reverse. This person is emphasizing that he has no home. In fact, what he wants to hide is the fact that they do have a home." They are even on guard against their own people. Maxwell's face darkened. Note, the setting of the Grisk people is not fully developed. The original novel does not seem to describe more details of their mind control, but focuses on Thrawn's desperate counterattack to defeat the Grisk in the plot of hegemony. Therefore, I can only make some completions in my own way. Chapter 1991, Frankly Speaking. Indeed, deep in his heart, there is a line of defense imposed on by others, which is to protect the existence of their home planet. This Grisk man truly believes that their Grisk hegemony is just a starship civilization, Razdian said. Keith Maxwell looked at Sangar, his face still a little dazed. It was obvious that Razdian's telepathy excluded him. Let's go, we need to capture the other 6 Grisk people on the planet. Admiral Chiara stood up, ignoring the others sitting there, and walked straight out the door. As she passed by Keith Maxwell, he clearly felt the coldness in her eyes. But Sangara, who was sitting there, laughed loudly. Ha! You should know that I didn't lie. Ha! Admiral Chiara had already walked out, and Keith Maxwell felt extremely depressed. He raised his dagger, wanting to stab Sangari again. However, this time, the dagger was stopped by an invisible force. Razdian's calm voice sounded in his mind. Don't let anger control your mind, Keith. No matter how hateful this Grisk man is, any harm you cause him at this time will only play into his hands. As for the Kingdom of Dawn's diplomatic strategy towards the Chiss territory, I think it's better for you to be frank. Admiral Chiara is not the kind of person who belongs to the Chiss cabinet. Keith Maxwell was suddenly startled, and then he put away the dagger under Sangar's mocking gaze. He raised his hands and looked at them carefully, saying slowly, "This doesn't seem to be the usual me. I shouldn't have." Even if they can't control your mind, the Grisk can amplify a person's inner emotions. For them, it's as normal as breathing, so even I can't completely isolate it, Razdian said. Don't underestimate the Grisk. Although his psychic abilities are far inferior to mine, he is much stronger than ordinary Protoss warriors. Admiral Chiara said that they are a legendary species, which is not an exaggeration. At least the Protoss warriors cannot control a planet with just a few people. Keith Maxwell nodded. However, you can also regard getting along with him as training for your soul. As long as you do not succumb to your inner impulse, fight it, and face it, your soul will become stronger. And as long as I am here, they will never be able to touch your heart in the slightest, Razdian said. But I'm just a captain, Keith Maxwell sighed. He was obviously talking about the incident with Admiral Chiara. Then tell her what you really think, and leave the rest to her to judge, Razdian said. I believe that for the diplomatic strategy of the Dawn Principality, it is far from being impossible without Chiara's degree of operation. Keith Maxwell nodded again. I understand, thank you. He turned around and walked out, and Sangari's screams were heard behind him. It was obvious that Razdian was not a kind person, and he should be punishing this Grisk man by his own means. Arriving at the bridge, Admiral Chiara was directing the ground troops on the star map to redeploy to other areas of the planet, and then to contain the Grisk scattered around. She had become accustomed to the command method of the robot army. All instructions were issued through the T-Series tactical robots, which were then deployed. But she added another step. She asked the tactical robots to give feedback on every command so that she could distinguish how well those robot legions were executing. Keith Maxwell didn't say much. He just stood behind Chiara and watched the famous Chiss general's command. Although the military and technology of the Crustians are very backward, armored regiments were still beginning to gather in other parts of the planet, which could still cause a lot of trouble to the B-1 combat robots. It should be said that Chiara's command style could be described as stable as Mount Tai. Every step of her actions fully took into account the response to abnormal situations, and she always put her own self-preservation as the premise. She continued to conduct tentative attacks from all directions, leveraging the Air Force to constantly disrupt the deployment of the Crustian armored group, leaving them in dire straits. Utilizing the C-9979 transport ship, she quickly redeployed the robot army. First, she cut off the opponent's supply line, then took advantage of their returning reinforcements to launch a frontal assault, defeating them in one fell swoop. Keith Maxwell observed Admiral Chiara for over an hour. In that time, Chiara commanded the robot army to defeat a Crustian force roughly equivalent to an armored division, destroying more than 500 of their tanks. From the headquarters perspective, this process involved countless battlefield icons, data, and massive amounts of communications and intelligence. Afterwards, General Chiara turned to Keith and said, "This armored force is the closest mobile unit to the capital area assembled by the Crustians. Conveniently, I have some robots ready to launch an attack immediately." "I think we can talk," Keith Maxwell suggested. "There is nothing to talk about. After all, you are just a captain," Admiral Chiara replied coldly. "I do have many questions, but you are not the one to answer them." That Grisk man was right. The Borg Re incident, where the Chiss accidentally bombed the colony, was indeed planned by the Principality of Dawn, Keith Maxwell said. "And I can also tell you that the Saberson family coordinated this operation internally and modified the Chislan star map data. However, we did not expect that the bombed colony was actually owned by the Grisk hegemony." Admiral Chiara paused, glanced at Keith, and said coldly, "Both the Grisk hegemony and the Dawn Principality are planning to completely annex us and make us your slaves. The Borglai incident was just a result of both of you plotting, allowing someone to take advantage of it." She continued, "What angers me is not your deception or your intrusion into the Chiss territory, but, in this process, I became an accomplice." Keith Maxwell pulled over a suspended chair and sat down, then said slowly, "For me, this matter cannot be simply categorized as right or wrong. The Principality of Dawn needs to bring the unknown star field under control. Therefore, we need to conquer the Chiss territory, and this is the current strategy. I recognized this, so I agreed to the awakening, became one of them, and started actions consistent with the goal of our entire civilization. But, do you know? The Principality of Dawn, or to expand the scope a little, the fourth civilization, Keith Maxwell said, is actually a civilization driven by fear. About 20 years ago, we were just a group of interstellar refugees. It was this fear that made us keep moving forward and expanding. In the end, we became what we are now, the Principality of Dawn." End of this chapter. Chapter 1992, Welcome to the Fourth Civilization. "You? Interstellar refugees?" Admiral Chiara frowned. "That's right, refugees," Keith Maxwell replied. "More than 20 years ago, all we had was a refugee ship, hundreds of thousands of hibernating people, and a vast number of frozen embryos. Apart from that, we had nothing. So starting more than 20 years ago, we began working on a small habitable satellite bit by bit, building our home and raising our future generations. In 20 years, you have developed into a powerful warlord in the galaxy, second only to the Galactic Empire." Admiral Chiara found it hard to believe. "Before I was awakened from hibernation, many things had already happened. Our fourth civilization has managed to develop and become so powerful in just 20 years entirely because of our leader, Grand Duke of Dawn, Tang Xiao," Keith Maxwell explained. "You may not be able to imagine how powerful and wise he is. Every decision he makes is full of foresight and, more importantly, full of aggression." Admiral Chiara's expression became solemn. The word aggression was contrary to the philosophy of chiseling. For them, it was the most dangerous word. "Before the establishment of the Principality of Dawn, we called ourselves the Fourth Civilization. This name is still used even now. The Principality of Dawn refers to the area we control, while the Fourth Civilization refers to the spirit and will inherited from our refugee ship," Keith Maxwell continued. "Why do you call it the Fourth Civilization? As far as I know, even the Galactic Empire's full name is just the First Empire of the Galaxy. What are the three civilizations before you?" Admiral Chiara was puzzled. "Perhaps because we have been drifting for so long, many of us have lost most of our memories of the past. But among the remaining images in my mind, I can indeed see war, fire, and death," Keith Maxwell said, looking at the ceiling, his thoughts drifting away. "Why the fourth? Because in the database of the refugee ship, we were once the last survivors in the entire galaxy. In the entire galaxy, there were only a few 100,000 people and those frozen embryos alive." Admiral Chiara was silent. "Actually, I still can't believe that those terrible legends are true," Keith Maxwell said slowly. Even the records in the database are very fragmentary. But it can be roughly understood that at that time, our galaxy encountered 3 disasters that could be called natural disasters. Each natural disaster was enough to destroy the galaxy. For example, one of them was called the Supreme Agreement. The ancient Super AI sent a tachyon ghost signal to all the robots in the entire galaxy, triggering a robot rebellion throughout the galaxy. And this is already the simplest description, because the whole process is more complicated and more terrifying. At that time, all the civilizations in the galaxy united to fight. Every nation with different cultures, habits, languages, and even living environments united to fight for survival. We succeeded the first time, we succeeded the second time, but the third time, we no longer had the power, Keith Maxwell sighed. So we are the 4th civilization, because we have fought against the entire galaxy 3 times, and now it's the 4th time. The civilizations of the entire galaxy united. I can't imagine such a scene, but I can only say that perhaps no grand epic can describe such a scene, Admiral Chiara said with emotion. Keith Maxwell continued, I don't know how much of the history left behind is true, but the facts are before us. There are many different races in the refugee ship, and how they ended up staying. Cultural inheritance. Only refugees who have experienced galaxy-level natural disasters will have such a diverse inheritance, because the inheritance of these civilizations is all that remains. So the Star Spirit is also one of them? Admiral Chiara asked. That's right. I don't have any information about the stars in my memory, but this is also natural. The war is all over the galaxy. For ordinary people like us, we will always see only the tip of the iceberg. But I know that the Star Spirits once created an extremely brilliant civilization. They also experienced painful nirvana and rebirth. They are warriors worthy of respect, Keith Maxwell said. So, what do you mean when you tell me about your Kingdom of Dawn? Admiral Chiara asked slowly. I want to tell you about the code of conduct of the 4th civilization. Grand Duke Tang Xiao of Dawn has inherited the will of countless races in the entire galaxy. Everything he does is at the level of the entire galaxy. Kai Maxwell's tone contained admiration for Tang Xiao. Even if there is only one refugee ship, he aims to rule the entire galaxy. For our civilization, which has been destroyed 3 times, surviving and integrating the power of the entire galaxy is just the beginning. I understand. So our Chisi territory is just a piece of cake on the way to the expansion of your 4th civilization, right? Admiral Chiara's tone gradually became colder. Keith Maxwell stood up. The trace of cynicism in his expression completely disappeared, replaced by pride and disdain. He approached Admiral Chiara, his tone equally cold. The 4th civilization is a civilization that carries the heritage of countless races. At least here, we have unparalleled tolerance. You can't resist, but at least you can choose a decent gesture. Yes, my meaning is, welcome to join the 4th civilization. Do you think I will betray my civilization? Admiral Chiara's tone began to become dangerous. As you said, I am just a captain, Keith Maxwell replied. But after all, I am the deputy commander of the 2nd Exploration Fleet of the Principality of Dawn. Regarding some of the plans and strategies of the Chiss territory, I was naturally involved, including this Borglay incident. You will not hear any remorse or self-blame from me. I will only give the advice I think is most appropriate, from the perspective of a friend. Admiral Chiara stood up and walked towards the door of the bridge. Keith Maxwell called after her. You should understand that even if you resign, things will not change. But I think that at least you staying in this position is the best choice for chiseling. Thanks to Rick for the 500 starting coins rewarded by Swordsman. Chapter 1993, The Greatest Sin. In the following days, Admiral Chiara remained secluded in his cabin, not emerging even once. However, the ongoing battle on the planet Crustal required minimal command, as it was essentially a one-sided conflict. Keith Maxwell, along with the T-Series tactical robots, made basic arrangements for the robot army. Meanwhile, the high-ranking Templar, Razdian, located the Grisk people and initiated a siege. Apart from Sangar, who was captured initially, the other 6 Grisk individuals were scattered across the planet. Each controlled a major city, with the number of people under their influence ranging from 20 million to over 1 billion. This staggering number was a testament to their formidable mind control abilities, a feat achievable only by a few exceptionally powerful beings among the Protoss. It took about a week to eliminate all the Grisk on the planet. 3 of them were killed in battle. Including Sangare, they captured a total of 4 Grisk on Crustal. However, achieving this came at a horrific cost. The planet Crustal originally had a population of about 500 million. In the process of hunting down the 7 Grisk, all controlled troops and civilians resisted fiercely. To capture them, nearly 50 million Crustians were massacred, equivalent to 1/10 of the planet's population. The Grisk, upon realizing they were under attack, immediately gathered all nearby Crustians to shield themselves. They showed no regard for the lives of the Crustians, and similarly, Admiral Chiara and his forces, determined to eradicate the Grisk, were indifferent to their casualties. This led to a series of extremely tragic massacres. As the war progressed, Keith Maxwell felt his forces were insufficient. He commanded only 2 Rookery Hook-class battleships and 1.2 million B-1 combat robots. In contrast, the Grisk mobilized hundreds of millions of people to resist. For instance, the last Grisk on Crustal had more time to mobilize his forces. When Keith Maxwell launched his attack, over 24 million people had been gathered in the city. At least half of these individuals, armed with nothing more than iron bars and knives, were sent to the battlefield. The final critical battle was beyond description, a true mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. After slaughtering nearly half of the Crustians, about 12 million people, Razdian led the fanatic warriors through the countless crowds to capture the last Grisk. The atmosphere on the bridge of the Joint Fleet flagship, the Behemoth-class battlecruiser Vigilant, was somber. Keith Maxwell sat dejectedly on a stool. Admiral Chiara, no longer confined to her quarters, also looked grim. No matter the justification, after massacring tens of millions, no one could be in a good mood. Keith Maxwell, upon witnessing the battlefield strewn with countless corpses, was overwhelmed. The sight of bodies blown apart by the powerful E5 blaster rifle nearly caused him to faint. Admiral Chiara, after learning of the final battle's tragedy, took a spaceship to hover over the devastated city before returning silently. Protoss High Templar Razdian was absent, occupied with other tasks. After capturing and killing all 7 Grisk on the planet, the remaining population of Crustal fell into chaos. These people, no longer under control, immediately descended into mania and anxiety. If one had to describe it, it was as if a person. For a long time he had been following a voice, even while eating and breathing. But one day, the voice suddenly disappeared. This person might not even know what to do next. Should he step forward with his left leg or his right? Should he breathe into his belly or his chest? When greeting someone, should he say hello first or call them by name? Everything that once seemed like common sense now felt strange and unfamiliar. In fact, without guidance, these people might not survive more than a month or 2. They were in such a state that they couldn't even take care of themselves. Fortunately, Razdian had found a solution. He would use his powerful spiritual energy to open a gap in the distorted souls and minds of these people, giving them the chance to remember what they were like before they were controlled. This process was more spontaneous, as Razdian was only one person and couldn't slowly remove the influence of mind control from hundreds of millions of people. To use a metaphor, the mind control of the Grisk people was like cancer, and what Razdian did was akin to injecting a drug that stimulates the immune system into the bodies of these controlled Cruster people. Ultimately, it was the immune system that solved the problem, not the power of the pharmaceuticals. This might save some people, but many would still be unable to escape mind control on their own. Restoring social order was also very challenging. The most immediate issue was how to dispose of the bodies of more than 50 million dead people. The greatest sin of the Grisk people was that their mind control did not directly use their own minds to establish contact with their control subjects, like puppets on strings. Instead, they transformed the control subjects into semi-automatic dolls. During the transformation process, the subjects' souls were distorted, their memories tampered with, and their consciousness controlled. This allowed the Grisk to control tens of millions of people with only a small number of controllers. However, even if the mind control influence was eliminated, these people remained under a certain degree of control. For the Grisk, this method was more effective, but for rescuers like Razdian, it was a troublesome problem. For the victims, it meant the collapse of their entire lives and race. The results of this massacre on the planet Kruste were immediately reported to the Chisland Cabinet and the Principality of Dawn. Lieutenant General Brent, after considering the situation, decided that until they received a reply from the Principality of Dawn, the combined fleet would continue their attack to further weaken Grisk's hegemony. Chapter 1994: A Sudden Turn of Events. Hyperspace communication can indeed be used between Chisland and the Principality of Dawn, but it must rely on the magnetic field radiation energy of stars. To facilitate smoother communication, the Principality of Dawn built a hyperspace signal amplifier near the star where the star gate is located on the planet Massos. Despite these efforts, hyperspace communication remains unstable. For instance, this time, due to encountering hyperspace turbulence, communications were disrupted, and it took more than a week to restore them. While waiting for a reply from Dawn Planet, Admiral Chiara led the combined fleet to eliminate another planet controlled by the Grisk hegemony. After witnessing the atrocities committed by the Grisk, Admiral Chiara temporarily set aside her grudge against the Dawn Principality and focused on combat command. The population of this planet was about 100 million, with 3 Grisk inhabitants. 2 were killed during the fighting, and civilian casualties reached over 21 million. The Grisk had prepared for this, mixing their troops with civilians to resist until the end. Clearly, the Grisk are an aggressive race that never retreats. For the Grisk hegemony, the losses in the offensive and defensive battles between the 2 planets amounted to just 10 people. However, for the United Fleet, this was the massacre of 2 planets. In such a war, if it weren't for the robot army, the situation might have collapsed. Even so, this was difficult for Chiara and Keith Maxwell to accept, as they are all real people. The behavior patterns of people controlled by the Grisk are not much different from ordinary people. They can cry, scream, and have normal conversations. Only when there is a problem with the Grisk controlling them, or when they are ordered to perform abnormal behavior, such as committing suicide, do their actions appear strange. To be honest, if he didn't have absolute trust in the personality of the Protoss High Templar, Razdian, he might have doubted whether Razdian had just pointed to a planet and led them to launch a massacre. At this time, the Chisland capital, Hisla, also expressed great concern about the course of this war. The Chisland cabinet suddenly issued an order to immediately suspend military operations against the Grisk hegemony, and the combined fleet was to return to the Chisland capital, Hisla, for preparation. Although this instruction was abrupt, it was reasonable. After some thought, the commander of the combined fleet, Admiral Chiara, ordered that all more than 1 million B-1 combat robots be left on the 2 planets that were massacred. These robots were to help the local residents deal with the tens of millions of corpses. After that, the combined fleet returned to Hisla, leaving only the robots driving the spacecraft and their trophies, the 4 captured Grisk people. Admiral Chiara and the others also had their own tasks to attend to. Upon returning to Hisla, the combined fleet immediately surrounded the planet and took a fighting stance. Protoss High Templar Razdian and combined fleet commander Admiral Chiara entered the meeting place of the Chisland's highest cabinet. 10 Protoss fanatic warriors and more than 200 B-2 super battle robots accompanied them, exuding a fierce presence. Chiara, have you finally decided to take this step? The Naruto family and several other cabinet members remained seated, asking coldly. The administrative core of Chisland is here. Kill us, and you can rule the entire Chisland territory. Maybe. I have no interest in what you are talking about. I am just fulfilling my duties. Where is the Saberson family? Admiral Chiara asked bluntly. The Saberson family is recuperating at home due to physical ailments, one of the cabinet members responded. If you want to kill him as well as us, then you may need to walk a few more steps. The tone of the Naruto family was still full of ridicule. According to the confessions of the Grisk people, we captured the Borgri incident that led to the war between us, and the Grisk hegemony was a self-directed and self-acted conspiracy by the Grisk hegemony. They wanted to provoke a war, and the mastermind behind all of this is the Saberson family. They have been controlled by the Grisk people, Admiral Chiara said sternly. However, the Naruto family showed no reaction. His expression remained calm as he replied coldly, "Oh, so it's another issue of Grisk's hegemony. But what about the Principality of Dawn? Admiral Chiara, you don't know the role played by the Dawn Principality in this matter, do you? So what's your position?" Admiral Chiara was shocked. "What on earth are you talking about? What happened to the planet Shizla while I was away?" Indeed, she had originally intended to blame everything on Grisk's hegemony, hoping to avoid a sharp conflict between Chisland and the Principality of Dawn. As Keith Maxwell had said before, Chisland was indeed unable to resist the Dawn Principality's invasion. So, since resistance was futile, why not adopt a more dignified approach to welcome the new order? However, she hadn't expected that the Naruto family, and even the entire Chisland cabinet, already knew everything. Her words had backfired, making her appear as a traitor who had secretly defected to the Principality of Dawn and betrayed her homeland, Chisland. The Sipla family, the largest ruling family in the Chis territory and the leader of the Chis cabinet, spoke slowly. The Saberson family was assassinated 3 days ago. Before he died, there was sufficient evidence in his last words to show that it was the Principality of Dawn that provoked the war and incited the Grisk hegemony. Our Chis territory was used by them and forced into the war with the Grisk hegemony. What are you talking about? Why did I never know about this? Lieutenant General Brent frowned. Do you think our Chisland will continue to trust the Principality of Dawn after such a betrayal? The Naruto family said coldly. We, the Chisland, express the most serious protest against the war actions of the Principality of Dawn. The Chis cabinet has unanimously decided to take back the warships of the Chis Defense Fleet, disband the combined fleet, and remove Admiral Chiara from her post, handing her over to a military court for trial. However, Admiral Chiara refused to give in. She stood up and said seriously, "If I hand back the fleet, then Chisland will fall into a civil war. This decision is unacceptable." The eyes of the Naruto family were full of determination. "Then, even if Chisland bleeds like a river, we will fight to the end against the Principality of Dawn, and you, the traitor." Chapter 1995, One-Day Rebellion, Part 1. Keith Maxwell asked Lieutenant General Brent in a low voice, "What happened on the planet Shizla during this period? Why did the attitude of the Chis suddenly change so much?" "I don't know. They hid everything from me. I think something happened. The Saberson family was assassinated. I didn't even know about it," Lieutenant General Brent replied. "This matter makes us very passive, because it was indeed the Saberson family that handled this matter before." Keith Maxwell nodded, his face solemn. "At the very beginning of this matter, the Intelligence Department of the Principality of Dawn proposed this plan, hoping to further bring the Chis into submission by triggering a small-scale war. Under this premise, the Ministry of Intelligence found the Saberson family. After promising to support the Saberson family to become the most powerful family in Chisland, they were very proactive in helping the Principality of Dawn complete this conspiracy. And now, the Sabersons were assassinated without a word, and a lot of evidence was left behind. In this way, the Principality of Dawn lost its position. It's understandable why the Chisland cabinet is so angry. They think they are so compliant, but you, the Dawn Principality, are still not satisfied and want to engage in these conspiracies behind the scenes. And the most important thing is that this conspiracy of the Dawn Principality is obviously designed to evade the 9 ruling families in the cabinet. So for the Chis cabinet, this is the most unacceptable thing for them. But the question now is, why would the Saberson family do this in a way that harms others and does not benefit themselves? Because if they reveal the matter in this way, they and their entire family will undoubtedly be implicated. The several Grisk people we captured this time told us that the Grisk hegemony knew about this from the beginning. The Saberson family is probably controlled by them, Keith Maxwell whispered. "Looking at the way they are now, I'm afraid they won't believe anything we say," Lieutenant General Brent said. He thought for a while, then turned back to Razdian, who remained silent, and asked, Mr. Star Spirit, is anyone in the cabinet controlled by the Grisk people? Razdian's voice sounded, No, but I can sense the remnants of the Grisk's spiritual energy. There must be, or have been, people controlled by the Grisk on the planet Shizla. Then they plan to use this matter to cause trouble, Keith Maxwell said in a deep voice. There must be Grisk people behind this incident. Perhaps they arranged the assassination of the Saberson family. The purpose of this is very clear, which is to provoke a fight between us and the Chiss. Razdian said, and in my opinion, there are many factors that you brought upon yourself to blame. Lieutenant General Brent sighed. There is no way. The internal struggles in the Chiss territory are too serious, and they are trying to undermine each other. This allows us to influence and intervene with them, but 3 years have passed, and we have never been able to control them. As for Dawn Planet, our patience is gradually wearing thin, so we have this strategy. Over there, the 8-member Chiss cabinet, headed by the Naruto family and the Sipla family, were talking righteously. No matter how powerful your fleet is, you can't erase the sovereignty of the Dawn Principality over our Chiss lordship. The violation. We will fight to the end, even if blood is shed like a river. The Naruto family stood up, looked here coldly, and said, Admiral Chiara, give the order to fire. With the current strength of the combined fleet, it will not take too long to destroy the Hisla planet through orbital bombing. In this way, you will surely have a prosperous official career in the Principality of Dawn, just like Severance Tan. Admiral Chiara closed his eyes and said slowly, You, don't do this. It will only make things worse. Our enemy now should be the Grisk hegemony. Isn't this? The Chafu family spoke in a sinister tone. Is this enemy brought to us by your Dawn Principality? We have no choice. Our Chisi territory cannot resist. We surrender. Dawn Principality, help us. The meeting eventually broke up. Admiral Chiara knew it was impossible to abandon the combined fleet. As she had said, if the command of the combined fleet were handed over to others within the Chiss leadership, it could lead to catastrophe during such a sensitive period. However, today's meeting left her physically and mentally exhausted. She approached Vice Admiral Brent and said, I hope to resign as Commander-in-Chief of the combined fleet. Moving forward, I hope the Principality of Dawn can exercise restraint and give us the respect we deserve. The people in the Chiss cabinet do not represent the tens of billions of people in Chisi. Do you really think so? Brent shook his head. In my opinion, you are the best candidate to be the Commander-in-Chief of the combined fleet. If someone else takes over, I cannot guarantee there won't be an incident between the Principality of Dawn and Chisland. You don't understand what those people are planning today, do you? Admiral Chiara's expression darkened. She understood all too well. After confirming that none of those people were controlled by the Grisk, General Chiara realized what the cabinet intended. They were using the incident involving the Saberson family to create a fuss, hoping to blackmail the Dawn Principality into retreating and granting them greater power. Although the Naruto family and others had labeled General Chiara a traitor, the Chiss cabinet had long been scheming to gain power under the rule of the Dawn Principality. It was clear that the main fleet of the Chiss territory was now classified into the combined fleet, nominally led by Admiral Chiara, but in reality, the command of this fleet was no longer in the hands of the Chiss territory. The super aircraft carrier Eternal was always stationed on the planet Hisla, the capital of the Chiss territory. This meant that as long as Lieutenant General Brent was willing, the administrative center of Chisland could be destroyed immediately. In other words, the Chisi territory was now effectively a vassal state of the Principality of Dawn. But were those cabinet members foolish? Did they really want to confront the Principality of Dawn with such harsh words? No, they were not. The Saberson family had betrayed the interests of the Chiss territory and provoked a war between the Chiss territory and the Grisk hegemony. The Chiss cabinet saw an opportunity. They believed that since the Principality of Dawn was at fault in this matter, if they started a quarrel, the Principality of Dawn might give in at the most critical moment of the war with Grisk's hegemony. In other words, the Chiss cabinet was using the lives of tens of billions of civilians as a bargaining chip to blackmail the Principality of Dawn. Chapter 1996, One-Day Rebellion, Part 2. Lieutenant General Brent had a keen political acumen, honed through years of diplomatic achievements. In the recent cabinet meeting, he directly questioned the high-ranking Templar, Razdian, about whether the cabinet members had been controlled. The answer was no, which made the situation clear to him. The Chiz cabinet was undoubtedly planning to exploit the Saberson family to their advantage. The Chiz cabinet's strategy was transparent. They intended to manipulate public sentiment by first seizing the issue involving the Saberson family. They would subtly suggest that the Principality of Dawn was engaging in dishonorable activities to control Chizland. This was already being confirmed by the news broadcasts. The second part of their plan was to completely discredit the Saberson family, accusing them of colluding with the Principality of Dawn and betraying Chizland's interests. The 8 major families would then unite to eliminate the Saberson family, despite it being one of the 4 largest ruling families. The outcome would be inevitable. Throughout this process, the Chiz cabinet would cultivate an image of serving the country and the people, unafraid of power. Even if the Saberson family was ousted, another representative could easily replace them. However, the absence of a Saberson family representative at today's cabinet meeting indicated that they had already been sacrificed. Public opinion had been successfully incited, and the Chiz cabinet adopted a defiant stance. They weren't genuinely preparing for a battle with the Principality of Dawn. It was a strategic posture. Essentially, they were signaling, "We are ready to fight to the death." But the underlying message was, "Give us some benefits, satisfy our demands, and we will help resolve this issue. Otherwise, the destruction of Chizland will also harm the interests of the Principality of Dawn." Razdian's words were blunt but accurate. "You deserve it all." The Chiz cabinet's despicable actions were enabled by the incompetence and conspiracies of others, which played into the hands of Grisk's hegemony and exacerbated internal conflicts in Chizland. Keith Maxwell shook his head and asked, "What should we do now?" Lieutenant General Brent replied, "This is just the beginning." Today, they made their stance clear in the cabinet meeting. Tomorrow, they will put more pressure on us. The cabinet's intentions are evident. Since the annexation of Chizland by the Principality of Dawn is irreversible, we must provide them with enough benefits to ensure they help us manage Chizland effectively. Otherwise, Chizland will become a chaotic burden. For them, there is no difference at all, because the Principality of Dawn cannot have such strong control over Chizland without their cooperation. Control over the Chiz territory, using Chiz people to rule and manage the Chiz people, is the best choice. So they remain the actual rulers of the Chiz territory. And now, with the addition of the Dawn Principality to bargain with, they might be able to get even more. Keith Maxwell said bitterly, "They've calculated everything accurately. The relationship between us and the Galactic Empire is strained, and a conflict is inevitable. So they are confident. At worst, they will shatter the Chiz leadership and then see if our Dawn Principality plans to fight against the Galactic Empire while enduring a chaotic Chiz territory," Lieutenant General Brent said. "What should we do?" Keith Maxwell asked again. Lieutenant General Brent pondered, "If they really incite the people like this, then things will be very difficult to handle." "Difficult to handle? Then let's not handle it." A cold voice suddenly broke into their conversation. "The Chiz cabinet wants to use the people against us. Then we can use the same method against them." Keith Maxwell and Brent turned around when they heard the voice. When they saw who it was, they were shocked. The next day, things really started to escalate. The 8 major families in the Chiz cabinet jointly issued a statement condemning the Dawn Principality's barbaric interference in the Chiz territory. They exposed a large number of the Dawn Principality's conspiracies and calculations, provoking a war with the Grisk hegemony, with the intention of overthrowing the Chiz territory and treating all Chiz people as slaves. As soon as the announcement was made, demonstrations broke out all over the capital planet Hisla almost simultaneously. Not only that, parades also erupted on at least a dozen other planets in the Chizland. Clearly, this was carefully planned and had been arranged long ago. Strikes, demonstrations, and even riots throughout the Chizland, All of it told the Principality of Dawn that Chisland was no longer under their control. However, less than an hour after the riot started, a sudden change occurred. A large burning fire cloud suddenly appeared over the city of Sipra, the administrative capital of the Chis planet, Hisra. There was no doubt that this was a terrifying scene, caused by the friction and burning of an extremely huge behemoth entering the atmosphere. At the same time, an extremely powerful electromagnetic signal instantly covered the entire planet Hesla, cutting off all communications. The same picture appeared on all media screens, the fire cloud over the city of Sipra. Soon, an enormous spherical spacecraft penetrated the fire cloud and revealed its true appearance. It was the spherical core ship of a modified Rookery Hook-class battleship, with a massive hull nearly 1,800 meters in diameter, painted entirely in blood red. Such a huge blood-red spaceship could no longer be described as flamboyant, because anyone who dared to decorate such a massive spaceship with such arrogant and violent colors would have been completely destroyed by a group attack. And if it was not destroyed, there was only one possibility. No one dared to provoke the owner of this spacecraft. Under the shooting of countless drones from various angles, this blood-red spherical core ship slowly descended, and its destination was the central square in the heart of Sipra City. Every media outlet and screen on the entire planet, and even the entire Chisland, was broadcasting this astonishing scene simultaneously. And the most terrifying thing was that when such a spaceship arrived in the capital of Chisland, no one knew about it in advance. Chapter 1997, One Day Rebellion, Part 2. The blood-red spherical spacecraft landed on the planet Hisra with an imposing presence, shocking everyone, especially every Chis on the planet who was watching the scene unfold through live media broadcasts. The audacity and dominance displayed by the spacecraft made it clear that the Chisi leaders were not being taken seriously at all. It wasn't difficult to guess who the spacecraft belonged to, as the massive Dawn Principality logo emblazoned on it explained everything. But the pressing questions were, who was on board and what was their purpose here? Chisland had become a vassal of the Principality of Dawn. Many civilians in Chisland were already aware of this. However, the Chis cabinet's propaganda had always framed the relationship as an alliance and equal dialogue between the two sides. Meanwhile, the Principality of Dawn adhered to a predetermined diplomatic strategy, applying minimal pressure on the Chis territory. Their intelligence agency continued to exploit conflicts between major families in Chisland to expand its influence. Yet, for the political system within Chisland, which revolved around the ruling family, this influence merely shifted from one family to another, from the left hand to the right hand. The residents of Chisland were not profoundly affected by these changes. Today, however, the situation had changed dramatically. The Dawn Principality's spacecraft landed directly in the central square of Chisland's capital. What did this signify? It meant that Chisi territory had never been able to resist the Principality of Dawn. The excuses the ruling families used to maintain their facade were shattered in an instant. At this moment, all members of the Chis cabinet rushed to the windows of the cabinet building, raising their heads to witness the shocking scene. The terrifying sight of the massive spherical spacecraft, with a diameter of 1,800 meters, landing was less shocking than what was about to happen. Whatever this ship brought, it was definitely not good news. Boom! The spacecraft landed with a huge dull sound, causing a small earthquake in the area. Then, the hatch of the core spacecraft facing the cabinet building slowly opened, and the ramp for entry and exit extended step by step. From the hatch, 10 elegant robots flew out. 2 of the robots laid a long red carpet on the ground, while the other 8 pulled out colorful ribbons. As soon as the ribbons were pulled, countless hidden petals flew out, transforming the area into a fragrant sea of flowers. Immediately afterward, dozens of gorgeously dressed ceremony officials emerged, chanting hymns loudly. These officials were all young and beautiful girls who had undergone strict training. Their voices were clear and long, and their manners were solemn and steady. Seeing such a scene, the faces of several Chis cabinet members grew increasingly grim. They realized that the visitors were here to show off, or more bluntly, to demonstrate their power. The grandeur of the display made it clear who was coming. Sure enough, behind the hatch of the spacecraft, a tall figure appeared. Average height, slightly thin, wearing a black marshal's uniform with a golden ribbon slung across his shoulders. He had yellow skin, black hair, and a dangerous glint in his eyes. It was Grand Duke Liming. Tang Xiao! Why? Why did Tang Xiao come here? A member of the Naruto family shouted. The fear Tang Xiao had instilled during his previous visit had not diminished at all. And now, Tang Xiao had come to Qixi territory in person? What did this mean? No, it wasn't a question of what it meant. The Qixi territory had just started to riot, exactly as the Qis cabinet had planned. Why did Tang Xiao arrive just as their plan was beginning? It would take at least a week to travel from Dawn Planet to Qixi Ling. At this moment, Tang Xiao had already stepped out of the cabin door, walking slowly forward with an inscrutable expression, surrounded by etiquette officers. Behind him, Adele Wulan wore a black dress, holding Tang Xing in her left hand and Tang Yun in her right. Tang Xiao's son and daughter followed closely. Tang Xing and Tang Yun were now 6 years old and had matured significantly under elite education. However, Tang Yun appeared more composed. She held her mother's hand, walking on the red carpet with her head held high, enjoying the privileges of status and power. In her other hand, she clutched an exquisite teddy bear, revealing her childlike innocence. Tang Xing, on the other hand, kept his head down, nervously gripping the lapel of his clothes. On the other side of Adele Wulan, there was another little girl in a white princess dress, delicate and beautiful, about 7 years old, Leia. Tang Xiao stood on the petal-strewn red carpet, stopped, and turned his head to ask slowly, "Tell me, what do you see?" "I see the land we just conquered, father," Tang Yun replied confidently. I feel that they are very unhappy with us." Tang Xing whispered. "And you, Leia?" Tang Xiao asked, noticing her silence. "War," Leia answered succinctly. Tang Xiao chuckled. "Actually, your answers can all be summed up in one word. Power. Yes, power." He laughed for a moment, then his expression turned serious. "I brought you here to show you what strength is, what a country is, and what power is. But it seems something interesting is happening here." "Oh, what the good-for-nothing brother said just now is right. This place is indeed full of hostility towards us," Tang Yun said, smoothing her long black hair, her delicate face full of ridicule. "Father, the people led by Qixi seem very unconvinced by us. So I'm here." "I see, I conquer," Tang Xiao said nonchalantly. He opened his arms, his eyes dangerously fixed on the cabinet building, and then, surrounded by the ceremony officials, he walked towards the building's entrance. Adele Wulan quickly took her children to follow Tang Xiao, but she never paid attention to Leia, deliberately neglecting her. Leia, however, didn't seem to care, treating Adele Wulan as if she were invisible. She even appeared indifferent to Tang Xiao, following him calmly. Behind their family, heavy footsteps echoed. Countless robots, arranged in a square formation, marched out of the spacecraft. Leading the way were numerous B-2 super battle robots, followed by even more B-1 battle robots. These robots stepped off the spacecraft and immediately surrounded the Qis cabinet building. More robots continued to emerge, spreading out towards various urban areas in Sipla City. The robots seemed endless. By the time Tang Xiao reached the Qis cabinet building, robots were still pouring out of the spacecraft, with no end in sight. At the entrance of the cabinet building, the Sipla family and the Naruto family hurried down with others to greet them. They had briefly debated whether to go out to greet Tang Xiao, with the Chafu family arguing that since it was the Dawn Principality's first priority, they should wait inside and let Tang Xiao come to them. However, the Sipla family quickly silenced this opinion with a simple question: "Do you want to see blood flowing like a river?" The 8 members of Qixi's cabinet now stood in front of Tang Xiao, bowing in unison. As the head of the cabinet, the Sipula family representative said, "Your Majesty, we apologize for not being prepared for your sudden visit and failing to organize a welcome ceremony. This was our oversight. However, Qisland has not been very peaceful recently, and we are under great pressure." "See? Power," Tang Xiao remarked, ignoring their apology. He turned to Tang Yun and the others, then walked directly between the 8 cabinet members. An invisible force pushed them aside, causing the Luogini family, who were unwell and weak, to stumble and fall. They quickly got up, not daring to show any signs of neglect. Together with the others, they waited until Tang Xiao's wives and daughters passed by before following them into the parliament building. Upon entering the meeting hall, Tang Xiao was not polite. He walked directly to the first seat, which originally belonged to the Sipula family, and sat down. He then waved his hand, motioning for Adele and Ulan to sit in other seats. Adele sat next to Tang Xiao on his left, with Tang Xing and Tang Yun on Adele's left. Leia sat next to Tang Xiao on his right. This seating arrangement was very deliberate. Tang Yun, however, was visibly unconvinced. She kept staring at Leia, who was only a year older than herself, with eyes full of dissatisfaction. Although Leia was beautiful, Tang Yun felt she was still far behind her. The fact that Leia could sit next to her father made Tang Yun even more unhappy. At this time, the 8 members of Chizlan's cabinet could only stand at the bottom of the meeting hall, appearing more like guests. Tang Xiao looked at the cabinet members in front of him, saying nothing. A faint sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth, and his sharp eyes scrutinized them repeatedly. It had been more than 20 years since Tang Xiao came to this world. If calculated according to his mental age, he was about 20 years old before time travel. Including now, he was already over 40 years old. At his peak, he possessed both maturity and passion. He had been in a high position for a long time and wielded powerful influence. Under the influence of the dark side, his temperament was even more intimidating. In the eyes of the Sipula family, Tang Xiao at this moment was like a lion shrouded in darkness. The Sipula and Naruto families had witnessed Tang Xiao's terror before, and now their bodies were trembling. Although others had never faced Tang Xiao's terror, the solemn atmosphere and the continuous emergence of millions of robot soldiers made them too afraid to express their anger. But Tang Xiao still didn't speak, nor did his wife and daughter. They just looked at the cabinet members. Fortunately, the political sensitivity of the Sipula family was still very sharp. The representative knelt down with a thud and said, "Your Majesty, please allow me to report to you. There have been a series of assassinations and riots in Chizland recently. After careful investigation, we found that the Saberson family colluded with the Grisk hegemony, conspiring to subvert our regime and create a rift between us and the Principality of Dawn." She quickly fabricated a story. "But please don't worry. We have dealt with the traitor from the Saberson family. His family will also be severely punished. Next, we may still need a lot of work to calm down some minor issues in Chizland. However, we will definitely resolve the problems as quickly as possible. If you, sir, can provide us with some assistance, that would be even better." In just a few words, she overturned all their plans over the past few days. For power, she was willing to do anything. It didn't matter whether this power came from standing or kneeling. "Do you know? Originally, after receiving Razdian's message, I wanted to bring my children and wife here to see my beloved Chislan province. But I didn't expect that upon my arrival, I would be greeted with betrayal and riots. Heh. I think, really, heh. You guys are really amusing," Tang Xiao said with a cold laugh. Tang Xiao laughed out loud as he spoke, as if he couldn't help but laugh at the joke. But what he said was not funny at all. The Naruto family interjected, "Grand Duke, please listen to our explanation. The Grisk hegemony has indeed penetrated the Chiss territory, so we still need more time to reintegrate our forces." "You know what? You guys reminded me of something," Tang Xiao said, changing his posture and supporting his chin with one hand, looking very relaxed. "I always felt that the Chiss must be allowed to rule the Chiss territory, and the power of your family is so strong and deep-rooted, so it seems to be a shortcut to achieve this goal through the family. Your Majesty, please rest assured that we will do our best to manage the Chiss territory for you," the Sipra family responded quickly. Tang Xiao smiled and shook his head. "But in fact, you haven't managed it well, have you? Now, riots, demonstrations, and strikes are breaking out on more than a dozen planets in the entire Chiss territory. So, is this the strength of your family? You can't even influence those people?" The Naruto family was dripping with cold sweat and quickly said, "Your Majesty, this is really Grisk's hegemony." "You have already told me the answer," Tang Xiao continued, shaking his head. "Since the ruling family of the Chiss territory cannot help me take this shortcut, then maybe the shortcut for me is without you." Several cabinet members were suddenly shocked. They looked at Tang Xiao in disbelief. However, what they saw was the extremely cold smile on Tang Xiao's lips. Maybe you don't know. For me, my education and experience may allow me to understand the power of the people better than you. Chapter 1998, A Gamble. Sir, Your Majesty, I don't quite understand what you mean. The Cipra family was dumbfounded. Despite their intelligence and sharpness, they were at a loss for words. It was clear that the situation was unfolding differently than they had anticipated. You don't understand what I mean. Tang Xiao shook his head and asked, Is what I said not clear enough? Or is your grasp of galactic standard language inadequate? Sir, please forgive me, but we, the Naruto family, are indispensable, the representative of the Naruto family said slowly. Tang Xiao seemed to find this amusing and burst out laughing. What did you say? That the Chiss cannot live without you? Ha! Then tell me, Naruto, what exactly do you mean? The Naruto family representative replied sternly, The Chiss territory encompasses the 23 official galaxies and 11 colonial galaxies under the leadership of the Chiss cabinet, as well as the 21.5 billion Chiss, including the 10 billion residents on the planet Shisla. 21.5 billion Chiss, well said. So these 21.5 billion people represent the Chiss territory. Tang Xiao's expression turned strange and dangerous. Now, tell me, Naruto, is it that these 21.5 billion people can't live without you? Or is it that you, these parasite-like families, can't live without the Chiss territory? Without us, all sectors in Chissland would cease to function properly, the Naruto family representative said solemnly. We work tirelessly every day, giving everything we have for Chissland. For instance, our family has trained countless officers and soldiers for Chissland, bringing numerous victories. Only under such a system has Chissland grown to this day. If it weren't for the environmental problem of chaos. Are you even more powerful than the Principality of Dawn? A childish but cold voice interrupted. It was Tang Yun, sitting next to Adele Wulan, who spoke coldly. Don't dare! Don't dare! The Naruto family representative subconsciously explained, but then realized it wasn't Tang Xiao who had spoken. He looked at the little girl, only 6 years old, with an exquisite and beautiful appearance, and was momentarily stunned. What surprised him was not just that this little girl dared to interject, even if she was Tang Xiao's daughter, but that she spoke fluent Chiss. I am Tang Yun, the first princess of the Principality of Dawn. As one of the provinces of the Principality, it is not surprising that I have learned your language, right? Tang Yun said coldly. Now answer my question. This is our honor. Honor. The Naruto family representative looked at Tang Xiao again and found that he had no intention of interrupting the conversation. So he said, Chissland has never intended to compete with the Principality of Dawn. In that case, what are you afraid of? Tang Yun pressed on. Each of your heartbeats exceeds 120 beats per minute, and fear has taken over your hearts. Since Chissland does not want to surpass the Principality of Dawn, then, what are you afraid of? We are, because of the majesty of the Grand Duke, so. The Naruto family representative stammered, unsure of what to say. Tang Xiao then waved his hand to Tang Yun, indicating that she could stop. He then said, Let's make a bet. Since you seem to think that if I had to choose between your ruling family and the 21 billion people of the Chiss territory, I would definitely choose you. Why don't we put it to the test? Let's bet. His expression became eerie, and his eyes flashed with cruelty. Which side will I choose? This was almost a declaration of murder. The Cipra family representative also knelt down with a thud and said loudly, Please don't misunderstand, Your Majesty. This is all a conspiracy by Grisky's hegemony. They just want to cause conflict between us so that they can profit from it. However, Tang Xiao glanced at her as if she were a pitiful creature. Do you really think that even if you unite with the Grisky hegemony, it will matter to the Dawn Principality? The difference between trampling one bug to death and trampling two is negligible. However, for you, the real difference is that this incident has made me feel I don't want to play with you anymore. Please give us 3 more days. No, 1 day. Just 1 day. We can deal with the internal affairs of Chishi territory immediately. 1 day. Just 1 day. The Inrakini family pleaded desperately. It's useless. It's too late. I can't stop now. Ha ha ha. Tang Xiao let out a creepy laugh. From the moment you put this scale in front of me, I had to make a choice. Isn't this what you wanted? My lord, my lord. Tang Xiao no longer wanted to pay attention to them. He turned to Adele Ulan and asked, Are you ready? Adele Ulan stood up, nodded, and said, Ready to face the entire Chislan's live broadcast. Tang Xiao glanced at the Naruto family one last time, his expression full of ridicule. His original intention of coming to Chisi this time was to deal with the problem of the Grisk people. Razdian had informed him that he had captured several living Grisk people and liberated 2 of the planets they controlled. However, the follow-up treatment of those controlled by these planets was a significant issue. That's why Tang Xiao rushed over with some people, bringing along the Red Comet 3, an enlarged and modified version of the Rookery Hook-class battleship. To address the problem of insufficient combat robots mentioned by Razdian, he filled it with about 3 million combat robots. The overall structure of Red Comet 3 is 5,200 meters long, with a central spherical core ship having a diameter of 1,800 meters. By giving up heavy vehicles, it can carry 3 million combat robots. The reason for choosing the Rookery Hook-class battleship for the enlarged modification was mainly because it is large and comfortable enough to be used as a mobile palace. Moreover, the surrounding ring guards the central palace, making it an ideal palace shape. More importantly, the sense of oppression caused by the separation of the spherical core ship and its landing on the planet's surface is a crucial factor for Tang Xiao when he visits and inspects various places. In contrast, arriving on an Endless-class super aircraft carrier, although also very large, gives the impression of coming on a battleship. The feeling of arriving in a palace versus a battleship is very different. Thanks to 213ager for the 6 and 66 starting coins. Chapter 1999 Awakening Declaration. This day was monumental for Chiseling. Just days before, the Chisi territory had been thrown into chaos. The Principality of Dawn, long considered an ally, was exposed for colluding with the Grisk hegemony, conspiring to drag the Chis territory into war. The Saberson family, in particular, played a pivotal role in this treachery. The revelation that major families and prearranged leaders were behind this conspiracy incited widespread outrage among the Chisi people. No one wanted to be embroiled in a war. Regardless of how just or necessary a war might be, the inherent destruction and loss were universally abhorred. In an era of information overload, public sentiment could no longer be swayed by lofty ideals alone. The more information people had, the more practical their desires became. This is why, as economies and technologies advanced, the cost of waging war skyrocketed. Even the Fourth Civilization, while promoting the ideals of the Fourth Natural Disaster, ensured that their soldiers received the highest industry standards in treatment. An army soldier in the Fourth Civilization earned more than 5 times the salary of a Galactic Empire stormtrooper who had not been paid for a long time. This financial incentive was a key source of their combat effectiveness. The Dawn Principality, by using a large number of combat robots, managed to dilute these costs. The Galactic Empire's reliance on clones and natural soldiers was driven by both military and political reasons. Under these circumstances, most people in the Keys territory felt unjustly dragged into the conflict. War meant that their property and lives were at risk. Typically, such anger would be directed at the existing administrative authorities, who would then find a scapegoat to take the blame. In this case, the Chisi cabinet pointed fingers at the Principality of Dawn. However, the Principality of Dawn refused to accept the blame. In the conference hall of the Chis cabinet building, Adele Ulan had prepared everything. Tang Xiao stood in front of the drone's camera, ready to address the people. His speech was broadcast to every corner of Chisi territory. People of Chiseling, allow me to introduce myself. I am Tang Xiao, Grand Duke of Liming. As this title suggests, I am the leader of the Dawn Principality. Currently, I am on the planet Hisla, the capital of Chisland. Today, I want to clarify 2 things. First, Chisland is now a province of the Principality of Dawn. Second, we have declared war against the Grisk hegemony, and Chisland will join this war. Perhaps you are wondering why we are fighting this war, and why Chiseling has become a province of the Principality of Dawn. Let me explain. First, the integration of Chiseling as a province was a fait accompli 3 years ago. Second, as a race that relies on mind control to infiltrate and invade other civilizations, the Principality of Dawn will never tolerate the continued existence of such an evil entity. Surely, you do not want your thoughts to be controlled by others one day. These are the results of countless events converging. If you want to distill it to the core reason, it is this: Chiseling, you are too weak. You are so weak that when the Kingdom of Dawn's exploration fleet arrived, you were defenseless. You are so weak that the Grisk hegemony could target you at will and infiltrate without any scruples. Your cabinet is... You are right about at least one thing. The recent strange happenings in Chiseland are indeed caused by the mind control of the Grisk. And why am I here today? Why in the cabinet building? It is precisely because of this war, and at the same time, because of your weakness, Chis people. You are too weak, so weak that you cannot even deal with the Grisk hegemony, and you must rely on me to clean up the situation for you. Why? Because when the Dawn Principality's fleet arrived in Chis territory after a long journey, the first thing that the families in your territory thought of was not how to block our progress, but to conspire and communicate with us, hoping to use the power of our fleet to suppress the alien threat. If Chiseland were truly powerful, would things have developed to this point? Then, it's still the same question: why? Let us think about one thing. If you graduate from engineering, become a good enough naval engineer, and work in the shipbuilding department, but because you are not a member of the Saberson family, you will only be a small worker who tightens screws. If you are a soldier who has experienced hundreds of battles, with rich experience and qualifications, but because you are not a member of the Naruto family, the upper limit of your life may be to be in charge of a bunker and command the heavy machine gun inside to fire to the left or right. Do you take this for granted? No. Let me tell you, the reason why a country is called a country is because there can be countless different voices within the country, but there is always only one interest orientation, that is, national interest. Every person, every group, every organization, every family should put the interests of the country first. This is the country, and if someone tells me that their family's interests are greater than the country, then I will only think that this is treason. And now I tell you all, why did Chiseland become a province of the Duchy of Dawn? Why is the Chis realm so weak? Because there are countless traitors in the Chis territory. The Sipla family, the Naruto family, the Inrokini family, the Sabson family, the Chav family, the Mies family, the Eliz family. Every family is a traitor. It is precisely because they put the interests of the family before the country that the Chis territory is so weak. Today, why did I come here? Because I can't stand the weakness of your Chis leaders. I can't stand that you can't even defeat the Grisk hegemony. We can't stand the fact that while we are expanding our territory, there are countless traitors behind us who are sucking our nutrients and holding us back. And I want to tell you that the foundation of a country is its people, and the people's efforts are used for the country. There should never be any family in this. Every bit of your effort and every bit of contribution should be presented to the power of the country instead of being used by those families for intrigues. The Chis people are powerful. The Grisk hegemony should be the stepping stone for the Chis territory. You should not be bound by your family. Everyone should have their own strengths and perform their duties, and you should not choose your life based on family interests. If you are a good warrior, you should join the army, even if your last name is Inrokini. Today, I am here to help you take this most difficult step. From today on, family politics no longer exists in Chiseland. The family no longer has any political privileges, but is a collection of bloodlines. I will make you strong, extremely powerful. Your true power goes far beyond this. All your achievements have been appropriated by the family, and your contributions should have made Chiseland stronger. Only by eliminating the family will you truly realize how far everything you have done can make the Chis territory soar. Let those rotten families disappear completely. Let them lie down and suck the blood of the people, and their life of luxury and wealth through monopoly will be completely ended. Every bit of your creation, everything should belong to you. Now, step out the door. We will help you destroy the family and return everything you deserve to your own hands. Qixi Ling should be the Qixi Ling of the people, not just the family's Qixi leader. Chapter 2000, Breaking the Old Order. Seeing Tang Xiao's passionate speech, the 8 members of Qixi's cabinet who were still present looked ashen. They understood that Tang Xiao's words were a decisive blow, one that would completely eliminate any space for their family's political survival. You won't succeed, Tang Xiao. You don't even know the foundation of our Qixi territory's founding, shouted a member of the Naruto family, his expression stern. Having already broken ties, he addressed Tang Xiao by his first name. Tang Xiao, having finished his speech, looked at him with a sneer. On the contrary, Naruto, you have no idea what the foundation of Chisland is. You use the people of Chisland as a bargaining chip to deal with me. You think the 2 choices before me are the Principality of Dawn or the Chiz Cabinet, but you don't realize that I can actually choose a third way, the people. You have been aloof for too long, so long that you think all this is a matter of course. He waved his hand, and immediately more than a dozen B-2 super combat robots stepped forward, grabbing the 8 people like they were mere chickens. Use your last roll. I need to borrow your heads, Tang Xiao said, making another gesture. Adele Ulan and his wife and daughter stood up and followed behind him. The members of Qixi's cabinet began to struggle, revealing their true, ugly faces. Some cried bitterly, some repented, some loudly begged for mercy, some promised huge profits, and some cursed. But it was all in vain. Their fate was already sealed. The luxurious hairstyle of the Sipula family member was torn apart. Her hair was disheveled like a madwoman's. She struggled and screamed loudly, "Your Majesty! Your Majesty! We are still useful. We can help you rule the Qixi territory. We can do whatever you want. Please don't kill us." Tang Xiao looked at her with a smile. If it were 3 years ago, when the Dawn Kingdom first came into contact with you, it would have been true. We very much needed the power of your family to stabilize the situation. At the same time, we wanted to consolidate our own power. Infiltration also required your cooperation, but 3 years have passed. Haven't you discovered that you are useless? He approached the 50-year-old woman from the Sipula family, pulled her up, then briefly tied up her loose hair. He patted her on the shoulder and said, "Be elegant. Isn't it better to keep your own image and die? Don't make yourself such a mess. You are all adults and responsible for what you do. Isn't that a matter of course? You think you have seized the Principality of Dawn to start a war? You think you can use the power of the people to put pressure on me, but haven't I given you my answer? No. No. No, 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 no. I don't want to die. I don't want to die." The Sipula family member screamed loudly, but she had no chance and was dragged away by the battle robot. At this time, a high platform had been erected in the central square in front of the Qixi Cabinet building, and 8 very retro gallows had been placed there. In the sky, a large number of drones were filming this temporary execution ground from various angles. Even in other parts of the city, many people were driven over by the robot army, half forcefully, to watch the execution. Tang Xiao came to the seat above the high platform and sat down, watching coldly as the 8 members of Qixi's cabinet were carried to the gallows by the combat robots. These 8 people were already paralyzed on the ground, feces and urine flowing everywhere, their ugliness fully exposed. A professional host replaced Tang Xiao and came to the live broadcast camera. He announced to everyone that the execution would begin in 1 hour. Then the host began to read out the decree that the Dawn Principality would next need to promulgate in Chisland. The first is to cancel. The administrative privileges of all families in the Chiz territory were revoked, and all laws related to family governance were abolished. It was then announced that in all state-owned industries in Chisland, all official positions held by family members would be removed and replaced by non-family members within the industry. For instance, in the education sector controlled by the Yinluogini family, all Yinluogini family members were dismissed and replaced by officials from non-Yinluogini families. Trade unions were established across all industries, composed of ordinary employees and lower-level managers. These unions would represent the lower-level workers and advocate for their demands. It was further announced that internal elections within all industries would be held by the trade unions in 3 months. Excluding the corresponding family members, other industry members would elect the first non-family management. Additionally, it was proposed that although the 8 ruling families were barred from participating in the industry affairs they originally controlled, they were still allowed to engage in other fields. For example, members of the Naruto family, who were responsible for the military, could now seek positions in the education department. This was previously unthinkable. These new laws and regulations were revolutionary. The establishment of trade unions was a direct challenge to the ruling family's power. Even the ruling families did not have many direct members. Their main method of control was through top management positions and macro factors such as funds, resources, and relationships. In any industry, 99% of the workforce consisted of non-family members. With the formation of trade unions, these middle-level and grassroots personnel, seeing opportunities for advancement, would likely abandon the families without hesitation. Moreover, allowing different families to hold cross-appointment positions was a strategic move. It did not outright eliminate the ruling families, but forced them to compete among themselves for survival. This internal strife would weaken their collective power. The Principality of Dawn had effectively separated the interests of the ruling families and mobilized the grassroots to compete for these interests, ensuring widespread support. Naturally, the ruling families would fight back, leveraging their millennia of accumulated power and resources. At this critical juncture, the 8 heads of Qixi's cabinet became crucial. An hour later, nearly 100,000 people gathered around the central square, where complete live broadcast equipment had been set up. A massive holographic projection displayed the execution. The chief executioner loudly read out the crimes of the 8 members of Qixi's cabinet. Following Tang Xiao's order, the 8-member cabinet was hanged on the gallows, marking the definitive end of the old family-centered order in Chuzland. Chapter 2001, The New Order of Reconstruction. The 8-member cabinet of Chisland was executed, including the Saberson family, who were killed in the previous internal conflict. The leaders of the 9 ruling families were immediately eliminated. With Tang Xiao's personal arrival, the riot that the Qis cabinet attempted to incite lasted only a day before it was quashed. It could be said that they were simply unlucky, or that they chose the worst possible time. Upon receiving news that the Grisk people had been captured alive, Tang Xiao brought his family to Chisland as soon as possible. He also brought more experts to study the Grisk people and wanted his children to learn firsthand about the nature of power and what it means to be an emperor. Coincidentally, the Qis cabinet's involvement in this matter led Tang Xiao, with his current disposition, to suppress them with an iron fist without any negotiation. The families of the Qis territory had been the biggest supporters of the Dawn Principality's penetration into the region. Due to the existence of these families, the Qis territory was in disarray without facing a powerful external enemy. At this time, as long as the Dawn Principality proved it was not an enemy, the Qis territory would collapse internally. However, 3 years had passed, and the Kingdom of Dawn's influence had become more entrenched in the Qis territory. These families had now become obstacles to further expansion of power. The ruling family of Chisland prioritized family interests over national interests, often engaging in internal conflicts rather than taking a long-term view. This made them appear incompetent in many matters. For instance, they were eager to undermine another family, but showed no interest in reorganizing production, expanding externally, or increasing their strength. Tang Xiao instructed the intelligence agency to create an incident that might trigger a war, aiming to solve the family problem in the Qis territory. Unexpectedly, the Grisk hegemony had similar plans. Consequently, the Grisk people and the Dawn Principality clashed, leading to the Borglai incident and subsequent war. Given the escalating situation, Tang Xiao decided to take a more aggressive approach to resolve the Chisland issue once and for all. Even if this caused short-term chaos, it was a necessary process for long-term stability. The public execution of the 8-member Chiss cabinet sent a clear message to the ordinary people of the Chiss territory. The once powerful ruling families were not invincible. The Principality of Dawn now held control. The ruling families had long controlled over 90% of the resources and industries in the Chiss territory, forcing small families and ordinary people to rely on them and endure their exploitation. With the resources of the big families now vacant and the support of the powerful Principality of Dawn, it was impossible for the people to continue enduring the oppression. The ruling families, in an effort to safeguard their interests, fought desperately. However, they soon realized that their true adversaries were not the Principality of Dawn, but the ordinary people who had risen in resistance. After igniting the flames of civil strife in the Chiss territory, Tang Xiao did not remain idle. He immediately went to the flagship of the United Fleet. The vigilant Behemoth-class battlecruiser loomed in the vastness of space. Admiral Chiara, the commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, sat in her command chair, her face a mask of frustration and disbelief as she watched the chaos unfolding in Chissland. When Tang Xiao arrived, Admiral Chiara's gaze shifted to him, the man she held responsible for the turmoil. "It's you who caused all this. It's you! You want to destroy our Chissi territory," she spat bitterly. Tang Xiao, unfazed by her accusation, responded calmly. "Why are you still here? You should have the combined fleet dispatched immediately to suppress all the riots in the Chiss territory and restore stability." "Do you think I will still listen to your orders?" Chiara stood up abruptly, her voice rising in anger. "Do you know what you did? You executed the cabinet. For Chissland, this is a declaration of war. Do you understand?" Tang Xiao replied, "Oh, so that's what you're struggling with. Well, I will give you one instruction. Quell the rebellion in the Chiss territory. I even allow you to open fire on the army of the Principality of Dawn if you think it is necessary. Of course, you can shoot me, but I must remind you that I will fight back, and I'm afraid you won't be able to bear the consequences. Now, start. Open fire on all those who disturb the public peace and suppress the riots." "Do you think I dare not?" Admiral Chiara roared. "Please," Tang Xiao said coldly, taking a seat and looking at Chiara. "Deploy the fighter formation immediately and enter the airspace of Sipla City. Prepare to fire." Admiral Chiara ordered the T-Series tactical robots. "Please confirm the target," the T-Series tactical robot responded. Admiral Chiara gritted her teeth. The target is naturally the robots of the Dawn Principality. But then she hesitated, her expression hardening as she realized the futility of her plan. The robots of the Dawn Principality were not participating in the riots, they were merely policing. The real rioters were the Chiss themselves, family forces and civilians rising up in resistance. Tang Xiao sneered. "Do you understand? I never gave any combat orders to my robot army. In fact, even if I did, they wouldn't know who to shoot at. These robots don't know who is a family member and who is a civilian." "You!" Admiral Chiara was furious, pointing at Tang Xiao but unable to find the words. "Admiral Chiara, you should understand that this is the people's choice," Tang Xiao said, shaking his head. "If the ruling family were truly politically clean and enterprising, would the people rise up against them when I lit this fire? The stronger the resistance, the more severe the oppression, and the more cruel the exploitation. So, let me reiterate my instructions." Tang Xiao maintained his seated position and spoke slowly. "Quell this riot, and you can open fire on anyone. Thanks to Mr. Mingxi for the 500 starting coins. Thanks to Juzun Gluttonous Rice Wine for the 100 starting coins." Chapter 2002, More Star Spirits. Looking at the stunned General Chiara, Tang Xiao said coldly, "What? Can't give an order? Don't know who you should shoot." You incited the people," Chiara said through gritted teeth. "Inciting the people? Ha. No, I gave them a second choice," Tang Xiao replied. "In the past, the people couldn't resist the family, so everything was decided by the family, and they had no choice. But now, I gave them the power and ability to choose. I just told them not to be afraid of the family, because someone can defeat them." "So how did the people choose? Did they choose to continue to fight with the family as a foreign enemy?" Admiral Chiara was speechless this time. Tang Xiao smiled and said, "This is an opportunity to destroy the family's power and lead a more normal, enlightened, and efficient administrative system to Chissi. Isn't it a province of the Principality of Dawn? This is naked aggression. Admiral Chiara retorted. This is already a fait accompli. Tang Xiao smiled brightly. What I am discussing with you is how to make Qixi territory better under this fait accompli. You invader. And the reason why I succeeded in my invasion was because of the corruption and backwardness of the ruling families of the Qis territory. If it weren't for the ruling families fighting each other and constraining each other, we wouldn't even have had a chance to build a good Stargate in the Qis territory. What do you think? Tang Xiao said. I can't possibly do anything for you. Admiral Chiara said viciously. I didn't ask you to help me. Just like now, I asked you to quell the riots in the Qis territory. Don't you think these riots should be quelled? I asked you to make the Qis territory a better place. Do the ruling families make the Qis territory better? I asked you to eliminate the Grisk hegemony. Do you think that such a mind-controlling race that has begun to penetrate the Qis territory should not be eliminated? Tang Xiao said. In fact, it is the same as before. What I always do, I give you options. Admiral Chiara turned her head away suddenly, her chest heaving violently, obviously extremely angry. But Tang Xiao had no intention of letting her go. He stood up and said, As I said, quell this riot, eliminate family politics, and then you will return the Qis territory to the Qis people? General Chiara interrupted Tang Xiao abruptly. Only then did Tang Xiao's expression change. He turned around and said, Qis Dominion, this is the last condition. Moreover, you must join our war. After speaking, he waved his hand and said, I will take care of the affairs of the Grisk people. Qixi leader, please work hard. In a month at most, the fleet will attack again. This time, I will completely solve the Grisk people's hegemony. After saying that, he left without giving Admiral Chiara a chance to refute. The ensuing chaos in the Qixi territory had nothing to do with Tang Xiao. He had already ignited everything, and the Dawn Principality had enough power to quell it all. Then, let's leave the rest of the matter to more professional and specific people. Tang Xiao returned to the modified giant Rookery Hook-class battleship, Red Comet 3. His wife Adele Ulan, Tang Xing, Tang Yun, and Leia were waiting there, along with Keith Maxwell and Lieutenant General Brent. Tang Xiao said to Adele Ulan, This time, the political evolution of the Qis territory will be directed by you. After that, I will find a governor to take charge of all affairs of the Qis territory. A Qis governor? Adele Ulan asked calmly, smiling. She didn't feel any trepidation at all about receiving such a difficult task. She had been Tang Xiao's wife for 8 years, and was no longer the innocent little princess of Rendili she once was. Of course, no. Tang Xiao showed an incomprehensible smile. I don't want the Qis people to live too comfortably. I understand. Adele Ulan made a noble salute to Tang Xiao very appropriately. As the governor takes office, I will address the issue of the Qixi leader. During this process, Tang Xing and Tang Yun will also gain valuable experience, Tang Xiao stated firmly. Turning to Brent and the others, he continued, Your mission remains unchanged. Assist General Chiara in quelling the rebellion in the Qis territory. After I resolve the problem with the Grisk people, lead the troops to eliminate this threat once and for all. Yes, sir. Lieutenant General Brent and Keith Maxwell responded, standing at attention and saluting. With the arrangements made, Tang Xiao proceeded to the laboratory on the other side of the spacecraft, where the 4 captured Grisk individuals had been transferred. High Templar Razdian of the Protoss was present, along with several other Protoss members. Among them were the Dark Templar Sorae of the Saligar tribe, Aura Khan, and another high-ranking Templar from the Silak tribe, Rosales. The Protoss were deeply concerned about the Grisk's dominance, as it was rare for a race to possess such powerful mind controllers. The Protoss, who abhorred the abuse of mental powers to control other races, had gathered 2 high-level Templars and 2 Dark Templars to address the issue. At the other end of the laboratory, more than a dozen women in white robes stood solemnly. Remarkably, these women were all highly force-sensitive. As Tang Xiao entered, they approached, raised their hands above their heads, and knelt, saying, Welcome, the Son of God has arrived. Rise, Tang Xiao commanded with a nod. Razdian spoke up. Before your arrival, we conducted some research on these Grisk individuals. As previous experiments indicated, their control method directly affects the human brain and even the soul. What is your understanding of the soul? Tang Xiao inquired. Soul is merely a term, Razdian explained. For beings with powerful spiritual energy, they can extract their own consciousness and even the consciousness of others, which we refer to as the soul. In mind control, we build a bridge between our consciousness and the targets, commanding them to perform actions. However, the Grisk people operate differently. They directly modify the other party's consciousness, ensuring loyalty. Tang Xiao's expression grew serious. What concerns me is how to handle those controlled by the Grisk. The massacre of tens of millions on the planet crust is not only challenging to address, but also results in significant waste. End of chapter. Chapter 2003, Holy Advent Sect, Part 1. This will be very difficult. We can only find ways to restore their tampered souls. However, once there are too many affected, it will be extremely challenging. A conservative estimate is that it will take hundreds of years, Razdian said. I don't think these races will survive until then. So, we should fully consider Anita's suggestion. I think her way is feasible, Rosales, another high-ranking Templar, added. He was a high-ranking Templar of the Silak tribe, sent by Zekaras, the leader of the Silak tribe. Just like their area of responsibility, Rosales also presided over the ritual activities of the Protoss and the research activities of psychic energy. His voice in Tang Xiao's mind was softer than Razdian's, which made people feel very comfortable. In fact, he was also about a head shorter than Razdian. If Razdian looked like a powerful warrior at first glance, Rosales seemed to find it difficult to associate him with the word warrior. Have you tried it, Anita? Tang Xiao turned to look at the leader among the women. She was a woman who looked to be in her 30s, with blonde hair tied high on her head. She had a beautiful and cold appearance. Her white robe was dotted with flowers, and there were elegant and gorgeous epaulettes on her shoulders. She stood there like a goddess in a fantasy theme, holy and inviolable. The purpose of the Holy Advent sect is to cleanse sinful souls and guide people on the path to unity, Anita said, holding a flower in her hands very elegantly. A golden light followed her movements in the air, drawing a beautiful line. People controlled by the Grisk are guilty and should be redeemed. When Anita spoke, she used the Force to make her voice more ethereal, making it seem as if the sound came from all directions without a discernible source. Although he didn't speak, Tang Xiao clearly felt that Razdian was dismissive of the behavior of this group of women. On the contrary, Rosales didn't show any emotions, perhaps because he was actually a stickler for protocol. You took the initiative to come to me and said that you had a solution to this problem, so I gave you this opportunity. Don't let me down, Holy Advent sect, Tang Xiao said lightly. Anita was the Pope of the Holy Advent sect. She was a master who had awakened from a cryopod. She was originally a very good media editor, but unexpectedly, she awakened a powerful force in the hibernation cabin. Such examples are rare in hibernation cabins. Most of the Force-sensitive individuals in the Fourth Civilization are either grown from frozen embryos or are naturally conceived in the second or third generation. The reason why Anita became the Pope of the Holy Advent sect is actually not an accident. A long time ago, Tang Xiao established the Ghost Academy, the Holy Advent Academy, and the Holy Advent sect to deal with Force-sensitive individuals from three aspects: military, theoretical, and religious, respectively. What Tang Xiao wants to do is to completely popularize the Force, instead of limiting it to a small range like the Jedi Order. He believes that the Force should be the path for the evolution of life. The mere physical body is only the first step in life, but if you want to explore the true meaning of the universe, you must have more powerful power. The entire civilization should have it. Therefore, the first step should be to make the physical body stronger and more perfect through genetic engineering and genetic tailoring. The second step is to break free from the shackles of the physical body and sublimate life. And because the Force exists in this world, the way to sublimate life is almost certainly based on the Force. The Holy Advent sect is an important part of this plan. The reason why Anita is so powerful is because the work of the Fourth Civilization in the early years was not popular enough, so she was missed in the first few rounds of screening. Luna Huan, Jing. The census of several people had overlooked a crucial detail. Adults could awaken to the Force. Consequently, Anita missed the prime opportunity for training. Her Force talent was discovered only when she was already 30 years old. Despite this late discovery, Anita became an ardent admirer of Tang Xiao. Her admiration intensified upon learning about her talent. She fervently wrote articles and recorded programs, extolling Tang Xiao's great achievements and expressing her profound admiration for him. To her, Tang Xiao was almost a god, and she revered the immensely powerful dark side of the Force. Anita's fervor eventually caught the attention of higher authorities. When Helmut Zemo decided to establish the Holy Advent sect, he approached her. After a lengthy conversation, Zemo was very pleased with Anita's mindset. He appreciated her idea of worshipping Tang Xiao as a deity. Zemo then tasked Anita with drafting a religious charter. Anita excelled in this task, creating a monotheistic sect that deified Tang Xiao. In her teachings, Tang Xiao was the supreme god, the entity who controlled life and death. However, Anita faced challenges when she began her missionary work. Although her charter was well written, it was insufficient for indoctrinating people into a religion. This issue was eventually reported to Tang Xiao. While Tang Xiao was not particularly interested in religious zealots, he recalled a group of such individuals from Original Sin of the Empire of the Sun, the Advent. In fact, the name Holy Advent Sect was inspired by this group. Tang Xiao accessed the database to retrieve the technology of the Holy Messenger. Among these technologies were the teachings of the Holy Messenger, which were very comprehensive, provocative, and captivating. The motherships housed several high-level heroes in cryogenic chambers, but there were no frozen embryos of the Holy Advent messengers. This was because, at their core, they were still human beings. Tang Xiao had no intention of awakening the holy messengers in the cryogenic chambers. These zealots were fanatical believers, and it was unlikely they would accept him after being awakened. However, as a race whose nation was founded on religion and spiritual energy, the teachings of the Holy Messenger were very complete and seemed to genuinely enhance one's connection with the Force. End of chapter.